Thank you, everybody, for coming today. There will be a meeting of the New Hampshire Fish and Game Commission on Tuesday, March 17th, 2026 at 1 p.m. at the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department. Please be advised that this meeting is being captured on video. We could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The public is entitled to attend all commission meetings, and when recognized by the chairman, the public may speak on any item on the agenda. The chairman reserves the right to limit public comments to the extent necessary for orderly conduct of the meeting. Action item number 1, approval of the February 17th, 2026 commission meetings.
Move to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a first and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Number 2, consent agenda. The following items have been grouped together and noticed as consent agenda items to expedite action on routine matters which may not require public discussion. Commission members may remove certain items. Oh, sorry.
I'd like to have removed from the agenda under old business, HB 1140 and HB 1603.
I would just say, can we make that motion when we get to old business? Just in order? But I can call up on you right then when that comes.
Give me a heads up.
Okay. Where was I? Sorry. Commission members may remove certain items if further public input discussion is deemed necessary. 2A, approval to accept the following donations totaling $5,100 made to the search and rescue account. John Berry, $5,000. Marvin Schwartz, $100. Approval to accept the donation of $100 from the Buffington family, Enfield, New Hampshire, in memory of Alan Buffington of Clinton, Connecticut, for deposit in the Fish and Game Fund. Could I entertain a motion to approve items 2A and 2B?
Make a motion to approve items 2A and 2B.
Do I have a second? Seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, information item, financial statement.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Director. You have in front of you your financial statement for the period ending February 28th, 2026. The only item I have to report, and it's a good item, is we have been approved for our federal recoveries indirect rate. So we will be seeing some monies coming in that little pot. Can I entertain any questions? I answered his question. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, overview of the proposed adjustment to the wildlife habitat fee through the rulemaking process.
Good afternoon, Commission. Executive Director Simic. I'm Jim Ayler, the Wildlife Habitat Program Supervisor here at Fish and Game, here to give you some information and obtain your input on the Wildlife Habitat license fee. As you may know, that the Wildlife Habitat Program and the Habitat license fee celebrated its 25th anniversary back in 2024. It was created through legislation, and it was set at a fee of $2.50. It's been $2.50 since 1999. The legislation also created sideboards on what we could do with those funds, including conserving, restoring, and actively managing wildlife habitat on both public and private lands. And as an example of what we've accomplished in that regard, through the Small Grants Program, which provides financial assistance to landowners, we funded over 1,000 private lands projects, and in so doing have kept over 400,000 acres open for wildlife recreation. We can also secure land and easements that protect key ecosystems. And our accomplishments in that regard, we've conserved over 35,000 acres using the wildlife habitat license, including the 3,000-acre Ruger WMA in Croydon, Newport, and Grantham. We can improve public access to conserved areas, and we've been making concerted efforts to do that, to improve our infrastructure on our wildlife management areas over the last 10 to 15 years or so, including making sure we have signs at every WMA, repairing access roads, parking areas, culverts, what have you. And we can provide essential information to the public about these properties and the benefits they deliver. And we've been doing that through the interactive WMA map that's on our website, the twice annual interactive reports that I do that that explains to folks what we've been doing on our wildlife management areas near where they live, work, or play. And we've been doing WMA video profiles that we post on our social media. And this habitat license fee brings in about $120,000 to $140,000 per year. But we all know that costs are rising on everything we do. Remember, that fee has remained $250 since 1999. And so just a few examples here. Conserving habitat in 2023 and 24, we are able to conserve almost 3,000 acres of habitat. The core funding for that is the Wildlife Restoration Grant Program funds from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but we still need to provide 25% match, non-federal match. That totaled up to, for these projects, $1.25 million, which is 10 times what we get from the Wildlife Habitat Fund annually. Regarding managing habitat, we did an assessment recently. We have about 800 acres of young forest habitat that we have to maintain, primarily using these mulching mowers. And so we have to do about 100 acres per year at an estimated cost of $100,000 annually, a little bit less than what we currently get from the wildlife habitat fee. We need to do a better job of controlling invasive exotic plants on the habitats on our wildlife management areas, and we know that costs on average around $500 per acre in those areas that we feel it prudent to do so. And stewarding the land, we have lots of infrastructure. This inventory keeps growing. We have 95 parking areas, 131 gates, 151 signs, 130 miles of access roads, and over 250 stream crossings and drainage culverts, and we're not done doing that inventory, putting that information in our database, so that's going to continue to grow. A lot of those are in pretty bad shape, as you can see here, and all of those cost significant funds to repair or maintain. Just some examples. In 2017, on our Connecticut Lakes Natural Area up in Pittsburgh, we had to resurface East Inlet Road, 9 miles. That's a main artery for recreation, forest management, etc. Cost us $225,000, twice what we get annually from the wildlife habitat license fee. In 2025, we had to replace 3 bridges on East Inlet Road due to a significant rain event in 2024. Replace damaged culverts on 3 other roads at a cost of almost $220,000. Again, almost twice what we get annually from the wildlife habitat license fee. Thankfully, this was covered by FEMA, but that may not always be the case. The future Walski WMA, 1,300 acres in Marlow, which hopefully will be in our hands by the end of June or July. We need to replace an undersized box culvert with a 40-foot bridge. You can see that culvert no longer has any aggregate on top of it because it is so small that during high rain events, it washes over the road and washes the gravel and stone downstream. It also prevents aquatic organism passage. So we estimate that that's going to cost $150,000, a tad bit higher than what we currently get annually from the wildlife habitat license fee. Who maintains all of this? 2 people, really like 1.3, 1.5 full-time equivalents. Kyle Bilodeau, who takes care of our infrastructure south of the notches, and John Soika north of the notches. But John has other duties, so he spends like 30 to 50% of his time on infrastructure. These guys need help. That's a lot of infrastructure to maintain for 1.5 people. This is the federal apportionments through the Wildlife Restoration Grant Program since 2005. You can see a pretty steady, if you did a trend line on that, it'd be a nice pretty steep slope, which we'd like to see. But we need to keep those monies in New Hampshire for New Hampshire good, so we need match. And we need more match than we currently have. which could come from the wildlife habitat license fee. And so to have the same buying power in 1999, that $250 has to be $4.93 today, or we'd like to round that up to $5. And that's just to restore the buying power that was intended in 1999. That is the same cost of one turkey shot shell. It's less than the cost of 1 gallon of gas to get to your favorite hunting grounds. It's less than the cost of a medium iced Dunks, which so many of us buy on a daily or almost daily basis. It aligns totally with the strategic plan. One of the goals of that plan is to sustain and enhance the fish, wildlife, and marine resources for their own viability, for traditions of hunting, fishing, trapping, and outdoor enjoyment. It's exactly what the Wildlife Habitat Program does in everything we do: buying land, managing habitats, providing public access. One of the strategies is to include conserving or creating new habitat through free ownership or conservation easement, like the new or soon to be coming Walski WMA. We've got other projects, about 900 acres in Antrim, the former Monadnock Mills properties, and others potentially coming down the pike. Another strategy is to foster collaboration with private landowners to manage for quality habitat and public access, and we do that through the Small Grants Program, and we already mentioned the accomplishments that we've had through that. And another goal is to sustainable funding, modernizing funding sources. And that's really what we're asking here, again, to restore the buying power that was intended in 1999. And we want to make sure we maintain access to these, to New Hampshire's wildlife and wild places by ensuring state-owned land is managed for statewide public access. We need additional resources to maintain all that infrastructure in our lands to ensure the public has access to these lands, now and in the future. So we did a constituent survey back in 2023. 65% of the hunters and trappers surveyed agreed that the wildlife habitat license fee should be $5 or more. And back in 2024, when I sought input from the commission at that time, the commission decided to take a vote and unanimously supported moving that fee from $250 to $5. So in the end, the Wildlife Habitat Program conserves healthy habitats that sustain our fish and wildlife that are a vital component of New Hampshire's character and way of life. We need additional resources so we can keep up the success, improve the stewardship and conservation that we do, not only for New Hampshire's wildlife, but for today's and future generations. And with that, I will leave you with this thank you.
We'd like to say thank you for contributing to the health and vitality of the New Hampshire Wildlife Center.
Every year you purchase a hunting or trapping license, you contribute $2.50 to the New Hampshire Fishing Game's Wildlife Habitat Program.
Since 1999, the Wildlife Habitat Program has used these funds to conserve and improve habitats for the state's wildlife on both public and privately owned lands.
We also ensure you'll always have access to these lands.
You always have somewhere to practice your favorite outdoor pursuits.
Once again,
Thank you.
thank you.
Does anybody on the commission have any questions? Bruce?
I have two, actually. First of all, I know because I was given the pleasure of a tour over this forestry operation at Sickle Swamp area on the river property.
Yeah.
Is there any way that perhaps you could share with the commission, maybe next meeting or something, what kind of revenue we've seen from the sale of the property on that property?
Sure.
I think that would be something that, as we harvest and do timbering operations, it'd be nice to let us know, what sort of income we might have already seen or perhaps seen in the future.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's always cited also in that ARC Story Map report I put out twice a year. For each project, I say what's projected revenue for each project.
Okay.
But I'm happy to bring that to Commission next month.
And maybe, Mr. Chair, maybe if this just shows up in our packet somehow. I don't want to create a lot of work. I think it's probably fairly something relatively simple as an informational thing. And the other thing, some time ago, we got into a situation where we were buying the new fish shocking equipment, and it hadn't been upgraded in quite a few years, and we approved some money to get that taken care of. So going from $2.50 to $5, why $5? I mean, $5 is not going to last us another 26 years like the first $2.50 did. So is it make sense at some point to say it's going to be $5 for the next 2 years and another $2 or something, and maybe commissions can't commit monies from a future group. But the point being is we know if we're going to take care of this land, the $2.50 will catch you up to today, but 2 or 3 years from now, you're going to be right back in here again. Or I assume it would be back in here again unless somehow contractors get cheaper or fuel gets less and equipment gets less, which I seriously doubt. Some of this stuff is wicked expensive, as you know. But I just for the benefit of the commission, I would hope that we're not bashful about $5. Would we be bashful about $7.50 or $10 or pick a number? Because I think from my simple perspective, there's a lot of people that get a lot of great benefits from this, and an additional $2.50 to $7.50 or whatever the number might be, I would give a yes vote to. And I don't know about other sportsmen and women in the community, but certainly the $2.50 is great, but I'm not sure it's enough.
Appreciate it.
Did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'll say thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate your perspective on that. And that's the purpose of this, right, is to get some input from you all. We are open to either a higher value based on what the commission may want to provide as far as input. The other thing is we're open to the idea of a CPI, of a percent inflation every so many years. Those are definitely options on the table. To be honest, to go right out the gate, we just kind of did the consumer price index for inflation, came up with a 493, thought $5 is easy for people to manage and it's palatable to most folks, and that's where we started. My vision, of course, was to go higher, but we thought we'd start at a baseline and to see what the input we get from both the commission and the public when we go forward with these things.
Thank you.
Commissioner Green.
Jim, could you go back to the slide when you did the poll with the sportsmen?
Okay.
It's showing 37% were in agreement of $5.
Yep.
26% at that time was in agreement of $10.
Right.
I have to agree with Commissioner Temple. The $5 will catch us up to today. When is the rulemaking for this expected to come before us?
We're going to begin immediately. We're going to start immediately, but we're not going to go to, and Melissa can speak to that, but we're not planning to have this through the entire process until the summer, but we're going to start immediately with public hearings and getting input from the public and then submitting as soon as possible.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I know the last time we did this, it got shut down. I honestly think what happened there, we didn't do a well enough education. I love your presentation. That presentation should be what goes before JOCAG or whoever. But I'm in tendency to agree with Mr. Temple. At 24% years back and only coming up with 37% to $5 today, you still got 26% that agreed to go to 10. I'm going to have the tendency to go to 10 and use that presentation.
Sure. Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Tran?
I have a question. This is just for wildlife management areas, correct? None of this was affected into like the bridge replacements up in the Pittsburgh area when all those washouts happened?
No, that was FEMA covering that.
That was FEMA covering that?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any Commissioner?
Question and a comment. Do you know what your deferred either maintenance or improvement costs are right now for the properties we own?
We don't, other than for the habitat work. Well, for the mulching mowing work, we do. For the other stuff, we don't yet. We haven't had a chance to really assess that.
And I think my comment is similar to Commissioner Green and Commissioner Temple. I would encourage you to create that estimate. Try to think through what your current deferred costs are and the amount of time it would take you to accomplish that investment, and then rationalize the fee around that number.
Okay.
Because to my mind, it makes little or no sense to go through the process of educating people to the value and need for an increase if the increase isn't adequate to cover what we know we're going to have for costs.
Very good.
Commissioner Train.
I would agree with these gentlemen over here. I think there should be some sort of number and then a cost of living range, basically. I'm just going to call it that way. I think that should be in the formula in somehow, and I think it's going to take the concerns, and I think we're going to be beating this horse to death every 2 or 3 years. We always have to come up and if we implement a cost of living or business-wise, I think that's the approach at least I would want to do.
Very good.
Any other commissioners have any questions? Commissioner Temple.
I've been through this a few times on water and sewer rates in communities. And a lot of people will get very nervous when it costs less than 25 cents to put 1,000 cubic feet of water in your house. But when you raise it from 25 cents or from 250, they look at the percentage and they say, geez, you went up 100%. Yeah, I did. I went from 50 cents to 55 cents, which in their mind is a tremendous, so the presentation for me is critical, that they understand, forget the percentages of what the increase might be. Look at the price of a cup of coffee or a can of soda or whatever your beverage preference is. You think nothing of it, of going in and getting a coffee and a donut, and it costs just $6.25 every day of the week. Every day of the week. So for us, planting the seed for the long term, I think is really critical for sustainability, if nothing else. And I didn't do the math correctly in my head when I said we've gone up 50%. It was just a figure of speech.
Commissioner Cavaney.
Because I've had the privilege of being on a couple of these projects, and appreciate what they really are, with respect to getting folks to buy into this as really being worth the money, and maybe to extend the point that Commissioner Green made, there must be a way to take this on the road, so to speak, and get the buy-in from the public. Because the public is going to buy this and they're going to push it because they know of the good work. A question that I have been asked, if I might follow up with this, AJ,
Yep.
is, and I think it started early in your presentation, you talked about assisting habitat work on some private ownership, people who buy in. Well, I was asked one time if this habitat fee money, what portion of it really goes into Fish and Game lands as opposed to going into private lands for projects. Is that a fair question, Jim?
Well, I can tell you about $40,000 to $60,000 a year goes to private lands.
And those are all open to the public still for
They
hunting,
are.
correct?
Yeah,
That's part of your
that's part of it.
stipulation? Yeah,
That's a part of it. Yeah.
just for clarity.
And if we're able to increase that fee, we should be able to provide more investment to those private landowners. one of my goals.
Yep.
Commissioner Green?
Jim, on that survey you did there, it was only 315 hunters and trappers.
Yeah, it's a sample size, yeah.
Right. Between the commission, and I know I once did this, we have access to over 20,000. We as commissioners supporting this should be out there also giving our voice in these answers. You already got 63% that are of 315, but say we should at least go over 250. I say we go for the 10.
Okay.
But we're gonna have to work at it, all of us.
Thank you.
Don't lose the presentation. Don't leave that.
Commissioner Poole?
So, I know you folks have done this, but where does this put us? I know states around us increase the license fees. One of the things we've always tried to do is bear in mind where we are. Obviously, this is a license fee. Where will this put us if we go to the 5 and then possibly the 10 in relation to other states around us that have had, I know that there are other states that have increased their licenses, but
Yeah.
where will we be in that relation?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that. I don't know if Director
Yeah,
can.
we do have that generated. I didn't bring that file with me, but it puts
Yeah, I'm
us,
trying to pull it.
we're still, at $5, we're still comparable. There aren't, so the other states don't necessarily have the exact thing as we have. Yes, exactly, that's it. The exact thing that we have. But for example, Iowa charges $15, Minnesota charges $5, but it's just on their WMAs that they apply their money. Montana charges $8 for residents, $10 for non-residents. Colorado is at $11.50, and theirs is also restricted to certain types of habitat. So it puts us in a comparable place. At $5, we're still kind of lower than some of the comparable states. If you want to look at the states around us, there's differences between conservation stamps and habitat stamps. So, and they have very distinct purposes. One that really aligns with us is Wyoming, typically because of the size of the state, Montana typically because of the size of the state, and Wyoming's fee is $21.50. It's a conservation stamp instead of a habitat fee. I could go on, but we did provide this to the Sustainability Committee, and we could send it to the full commission so you have some additional information.
Go ahead.
I probably posed that question wrong. This is part of when I buy a license,
Yes.
what I have to purchase. Where does the addition of $5 or $10 put us in relation to Maine, Vermont, Massachusetts?
For the total license fee,
Right.
we're still comparable. We're fine.
Adding those.
Yes. Adding those fees in.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions from the commission? I would say that this would be an appropriate time if the commission did want to make a recommendation on that number, if somebody wants to make a motion on that, to bring it in further discussion. My only request to the director would be, to Commissioner Green's point earlier, is that if this commission gets a kind of a cheat sheet of your version of the presentation, so we're all armed with the proper talking points as this goes forward. But Commissioner Green.
Against my better judgment, because I normally don't go along with doing this. I'm gonna make a motion to the commission to go to the $10 fee when the rulemaking comes up. In other words, let's move this from information to an action item today.
Parliamentary, do we have to move it to, can we just make the motion, or do we have to put it to an action item?
Robert's rules.
What? Okay, right. So are you making a motion to do the $10?
Yeah.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
Second. Any questions now? Discussion? Commissioner Train?
Are we allowed to amend that
I mean, of course, yeah.
at this point?
Yeah, I would say let's let the discussion ensue a little bit, and then, but yeah, certainly.
I would just add to his $10, the cost of living, or however we want to phrase it, cost of living.
I'll put the cost of living in the presentation.
Yeah. Commissioner Stoll?
What's the motion?
The motion right now is to recommend to the department to put the habitat fee to $10.
Okay, I guess I would have to vote against that. I think we ought to go $5 for resident, $10 for non-resident. They already pay a higher percentage of a license to go and hunt and trap. I can't support jumping it bigger than up to $5 for resident.
Any other commissioners have any? Yeah.
I have a question. I think this is directed to the director. The authority to pursue an increase in the habitat fee does not require commission approval.
No, it does
This
not.
motion is essentially
Information.
an affirmation,
Yes.
right? It's a sense of the commission.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So you can begin the process without a vote
That's
approving
correct.
it. Okay.
That is correct.
I might have to disagree with that, Mr. Chairman. I think it's 20610 that says any fees that are raised has to have the approval of the commission.
Consultation.
Excuse me?
Consultation.
Is it consultation?
It's consultation.
Okay, consultation.
We're getting the lawyer over here on it for a moment.
My understanding is it's consultation, but that's why we're here. We want to have the input. It's important for us to move forward, to know what the commission desires.
Quick question on that. If we were to do a resident and non-resident, does that cause any kind of technological challenges for the department that
That's
would
what I was
cause
wondering
us
too.
fees?
Kathy, can you speak to that? Do we have it broke out that way, or is it just simply changing the number on the program?
Licenses are broken up on resident.
Okay, so we should be able to do it by
We sh-
changing the numbers because they're already split.
Okay. And Mark, you want to bring us up to speed on that?
Yeah, the director has the authority, after consultation with the commission, to set and charge fees. So it's consultation.
Commissioner Green.
I'd like to still keep my motion because it puts a message out there of where we would stand on it.
I would agree with you. Go ahead, Commissioner Hodgson.
Does the habitat fee statute allow us to have a resident and non-resident fee? I think it's an interesting idea, has a lot of appeal, but I don't, does it allow it?
It's not written in there as a separate one for resident versus non-resident. Now, I would, yeah, but I would lean towards the council's advisement here as to whether or not, because it's not written,
Throwing a lot at
we
you here.
still have the opportunity to do that.
Commissioner Green.
I think doing that's going to sow confusion a bit.
It might.
If we get into, hey, for a resident, we're only going to charge 5, and for a non-resident, we're going to charge 10. Keep in mind, we do count on a lot of non-residents coming up here as tourists, fishing, hunting. I think we'd be sending a bad message.
Any other discussion?
Question.
Commissioner Titone.
What would be the breakdown of percentages between resident and non-resident? If you had so many more residents than non-residents, would we now achieve a revenue goal that we're looking for?
I don't know. We didn't break it out by residents to do the analysis, honestly. I'd have to look into that. I can definitely dig that number up and get it back to you.
Any other?
We seem to have more questions than we do answers right at the same time. I'm just
Yeah.
wondering if we should delay this for a month.
Well, I think
Some number next month.
Right, so part of this is they are beginning the process.
Right,
It is
yeah, I get
consultation only. I'm with Ray that I do believe us making a recommendation today, and also we can have an opportunity to come back to this after we get public feedback, because, maybe we're all gonna feel different after we get phone calls. But at least it's a starting point, We're not married to it per se. Obviously, I'm not discounting what you're saying, I'm just.
No, that's fine.
Any other commissioners? So our motion on the table right now is to recommend that the department increases the wildlife habitat fee to $10. Seeing no more discussion, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
Please raise your hand if you oppose. Thank
We have
you.
2 opposed. Thank you. Next item, similar topic. We're going to move on to the overview of proposed adjustments to the fisheries habitat fee. And thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Does he dress like that all the time these days?
No.
Good afternoon, Commission. My name is Jared Lamy. I'm the fish habitat biologist for the Inland Fisheries Division here at New Hampshire Fish and Game. So on a similar topic, we're going to talk about potential increase of our fisheries habitat fee. So the fisheries habitat account was created in the year 2000 by the state legislature, and that created a $1 fisheries habitat fee on every fishing license sold in the state. And the idea behind this was to support on-the-ground restoration and land conservation that benefits aquatic habitat in the state. There's some specific language related to exactly how this fund can be used, and it's for the development, management, preservation, conservation, restoration, and maintenance of fisheries habitat in waters of the state, with at least 50% of the annual revenue to pay cost of labor and materials for direct management activities. So I think it's important to note that this work doesn't happen without staff to implement these projects and see them through. So basically, the purpose of this account is to address really a long history of habitat degradation in aquatic ecosystems throughout the state. That really started in the 18th century, or 19th century and early 20th century with significant clear cutting and unsustainable timber harvest that occurred throughout the state. It's really hard to overstate the impact that had not only on our land, but the waterways throughout the state. In order to correct some of the historic damage that has been done, there's really a lot of work to be done for aquatic restoration in the state. There has been legislation even at the federal level that has improved things, especially at a water quality level. I mean, I think we're all familiar with the Clean Water Act, but that doesn't necessarily address some of the physical impacts to our streams and rivers throughout the state. So again, the focus of this account is for aquatic habitat restoration. And we really like to focus on passive restoration and allowing natural riverine processes to take place. Rivers and streams kind of have a way of naturally distributing sediment in a way that creates diverse habitat. And when we place human infrastructure in these rivers and streams, that often has a way of disrupting these natural processes. So a lot of the work that we pay for in this account focuses on barrier removal, floodplain reconnection, and land conservation. So again, the goal is really to promote natural sediment transport and flow regimes. And wherever possible, getting human infrastructure out of the way of rivers and streams. So as we're all aware, based on previous projects that we've brought to the Commission, a lot of these projects can be really expensive to implement. A lot of that cost ends up being some of the permitting that's involved with working in a waterway, as well as engineering that is required to implement some of these projects. I also mentioned that land conservation is a big part of what we like to fund out of this account. And I think we're all aware that land in the vicinity of waterways, rivers, streams, lakes, and ponds often comes at a premium price. So overall, there are different sources of aquatic habitat restoration funding in New Hampshire, but I want to emphasize there is a lack of fish-focused restoration funding. There are other sources that focus on wetland restoration, drinking water protection, and even some fish-specific funding, especially from the federal government. But a lot of that fish-specific funding is focused on anadromous fish species in our coastal rivers, and there's really limited funding for inland species. The map here shows the breakdown, I know it might be kind of hard to see, of the Aquatic Resources Mitigation Fund, which is, like the name would imply, gathered from mitigation that's collected from wetlands impacts throughout the state. And a lot of that funding, as you could imagine, is focused in the southeastern part of the state, where a lot of the development is occurring and a lot of that mitigation is needing to be paid out. As opposed to where a lot of our priority fish habitat is throughout the state, farther north and west, there is really limited funding from that funding source in particular to implement aquatic restoration in the state. Another major funding source that we have used historically to complete this type of work is the Upper Connecticut River Mitigation and Enhancement Fund, and that was created from a settlement with some of the hydropower companies on the Connecticut River. And as you're aware, we have completed several projects in the Upper Connecticut River, several dam removals, some land conservation, but that fund, as of last year, I believe, has been spent down. So that funding is no longer available. So I think Jim did a really good job explaining this, and I don't need to explain inflation to everyone. But overall, if we want to keep using this account for its intended purpose for aquatic restoration and land conservation, a fee increase from the current $1 fee is necessary. So in fiscal year 2025, we had a total of just over $182,000 coming in. That's both the $1 license fee and then the interest that accrued on the account. Annual expenses, so recurring expenses, we pay for dam registration fees. I mentioned staff, administrative things like that. That is, approaching the amount that we take in every year. So it's just over $176,000 every year. So like I said, the current $1 fee is basically covering day-to-day expenses and not allowing us to contribute to projects like we would hope to. So potential increase to $5 has the potential to bring an additional over $600,000 in revenue every year into this program to help support these projects. So I think some benefits that would be clear from a fee increase. We mentioned land conservation, and land conservation in the context of habitat restoration, I think, can kind of kill two birds with one stone by protecting riparian areas and land adjacent to aquatic habitat, but also allowing angler access to these aquatic resources. A lot of times, we talk a lot about match for federal grants, and I want to be clear that we wouldn't necessarily use this match to fund, or we wouldn't use this funding to match our sport fish restoration grant. Instead, it would likely be used for match for federal grants. So I mentioned those anadromous fish grants. We do some work related to that, but additionally, there's EBTJV, Eastern Brook Trout Joint Venture. They have some limited funding available to support these types of projects, but it's limited to $50,000 per project, in that you're competing all across the range of brook trout. So that funding source can get pretty competitive and does require non-federal match. I mentioned the ARM Fund, Aquatic Resources Mitigation Fund. That source also requires non-federal match. So unfortunately, in the past, we have passed up federal grant opportunities simply because that state non-federal match was not available. So it's really critical to have a source for the non-federal match to complete some of these projects. A lot of times, being honest, we are not involved in these projects unless we have money to bring to the table to help implement this work. So, I think it's pretty clear to see how fish habitat account and fish habitat program contributes to the Fish and Game strategic plan, particularly the Fish, Wildlife, and Marine Resources section, conserving specifically aquatic habitat in the state with a focus on long-term sustainability and those natural riverine processes that I talked about. One of the success strategies in that section specifically relates to habitat connectivity, and based on some of the projects that I've brought to you in the past, dam removals, less so culvert replacements, but I think it's clear to see how those types of projects can contribute to that goal. Also, access, obviously, a major goal of the department is to promote angler access, and like I said, by conserving land next to rivers and streams, lakes and ponds, it provides opportunity for the public to access these aquatic resources. Does anyone have any questions?
In this fee structure, recreational saltwater licenses included?
No, it's only freshwater licenses.
Only freshwater.
Commissioner Green.
Can you show where all this, let me try to rephrase this a bit. I see very little of this money that comes down into the southern part. A lot of it goes up north. Keep smiling.
And what's your issue?
I knew you were going to get into this.
They've already run their account empty.
One of the biggest issues, in fact, I just had a little tad bit of a discussion with Diane about this. The down in Hillsborough County, you take the Southeastern River, we've lost so much access. Plus, my biggest complaint that I've had from constituents over the last 3 years has been how the stocking has been backed off down in the southern part of the state. I know you say it's like dam removal and stuff. There was a dam removed over in Merrimack on the Southeastern River. It was supposed to improve everything. They put one giant sandbar just on the other side of the road, and you can't fish it at all. No access to it. How much of this, if we raise the fee, how much of this is going to get spread throughout the state? Not mainly up north. I rephrased it, I almost said you're back there.
Yeah, no, I understand your question, and I should also state that I think it's important to understand that by partially paying my salary, that this fund does not only contribute to the projects that we seek funding for, that we bring to all of you for approval, but I'm also serve as an advocate, for different projects that occur throughout the state. So while, they might not necessarily come in front of the commission, I'm definitely serving as an advocate for aquatic habitat on work that's occurring throughout the state, including the southern part of the state.
Jared, could I chime in? I just want to answer two things.
Diane.
One,
Diane, come to the front, please.
Hi, Diane Timmons, Inland Fisheries Division Chief. I just want to add, Jared is relatively new in this position. I was obviously up in the North Country and then moved down. One of the big factors for us in fisheries, because it is only $1, it is very, very small. And so in how we've utilized this money to stretch it as far as we can is we're very opportunistic in various projects that come to us. So we are not in the financial position currently at $1 to be able to leverage projects and create projects. So what we've been doing is, as we collect data and identify projects, we work with communities, we work with non-governmental organizations, we're working with academic partners to basically have them create the project and then us review it through our data sources and what we found, and then with that, we seek alternate funding, so additional funding sources to be able to make the projects happen. So the fish habitat account is such a small amount to many of our projects. I mean, these projects are somewhere in the $500 to $1 million range, and our contribution is somewhere in the $20,000 to $70,000 range. It's peanuts, and so that's how we've been able to do it. So the reality is there's more projects along the Connecticut River because of the Connecticut River Mitigation and Enhancement Fund. So you're absolutely right. The Upper Connecticut is a giant area that has been red flagged as trout habitat, and so as a result, those projects get funded by that very large source that is now going away, by the way. But then there's alternative sources that we've been utilizing through various partners. With an increase, it puts us in a much better place. I'm not going to lie, with a $10 increase, that puts us in a fantastic place. And we can actually be driving the boat and driving the boat for these access areas. We can actually be a part at the table, whereas in the past, we haven't been able to participate.
Commissioner
Can I
Green.
follow up?
Yep.
I know you say $1 is peanuts. And when you say going to $10 would be fantastic. I went to the $10 for habitat fee. That's affecting a lot of people, not just fishermen, trappers, or hunters. That's affecting all of the public. I just got done earlier today saying to you, one of my biggest complaints that I'm getting in Hillsborough County, speaking for my county, the fishing is terrible. A lot of the fishermen are saying, I'm going down to Mass, I'm going to Vermont, I'm going to New York. Don't expect me to say, hey, I want to charge you guys $10 more. I'm hesitant even going to $5 because I'm not seeing the movements in the southern part of the state.
Yeah, and
it'd be great. I know you think it's peanuts, but the fishermen, they don't, I'd have a hard time telling them, I think you should pay $10 more. Show some improvements for us.
Well, it's challenging to show improvements when you're already at a deficit, because the $1 is barely covering, I mean, it's only because we have interest on that money that we're even able to do what we are doing now. And that is why we need the increase, so that we can do more.
Yeah, just to back up, we do not do projects every year because we don't have the funding to be able to do that. So the projects that we brought forward this year and, well, that we're bringing forward today, one project, and the other 3 that you previously approved, those are because we stockpiled and basically saved that. Those were 4 high priority projects that we were able to support because there's alternative funding sources to make it all happen. But there is a reality. One thing I want to really make a note, because we did do the comparison to New England states, and one of the things that's a key important factor is our fish habitat fund fee covers all gamuts of habitat. It covers restoration, it covers land acquisition, it covers personnel, and it covers equipment to get that work done. That is very different than our neighboring states. And so a lot of those are just land acquisition. Some of those cover stocking, which ours has nothing to do. Some of them cover stocking, some of them cover particular fishing areas, so nothing even related to habitat. It just has to do with location, like trout parks or, designated sections on a river. None of the other fees are like ours in that they are all inclusive. So we are trying to cover everything for $1 per license.
Chair, I had a quick question. Did I miss the slide that said it went from 1 to 10?
It's 1 to 5.
1 to 5.
To 5 is what they're proposing. Yep.
You suggested
I was
10
just
would
covering
be
habitat.
great.
She saw blood in the water.
So, so everybody knows that I've always particularly the purchases of land and things. And sometimes those purchases are popular with the commission, which is fine. We're 11 of us making that decision. So, you know, promoting the money for the habitat fee on the land, I think makes a lot of sense. And I think going up in this fee makes sense as well. You correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you told us at one time, we're stocking about 7 trout per license sold?
Per angler.
Is that true?
Yeah.
7 to 1? And Vermont is stocking 2 trout per license sold?
Yep.
So we're, by increasing our fees a little bit, it's true. But in fact, we are really looking at sustainability of what we can do and can't do. And a lot of people come here because we have a great stocking program. And I don't want to get into the minutia of how much we stock, when or where, or anything like that, because you don't do enough stocking in Sullivan County anyway. But the point being is, as a state, I know we stock a lot up north. And I know they're frugal up there, and they've spent the last dime out of that North Connecticut River land, and this year you're going to spend some money in the southern part. I think I saw a slide recently that you're going to be spending some money down along down Hinsdale area probably.
Yes.
Or maybe up through to Lebanon, someplace like that.
We do appreciate it.
I know. But what's going to happen is they're going to stop in the southern part and spend their money instead of traveling another 150 miles north to catch a little brook trout.
Why do you want to put trout in polluted water?
My point being is I'd like to say, listen, the habitat fee, you know, we went up. We do have a excellent whitetail herd, as I understand it. We've been harvesting fairly consistently. Same with black bear and other wild species. And we stock in 7 to 1. I assume that ratio, once we're back with the hatchery running correctly, we'll be back right there providing a service to a lot of people here in New Hampshire, as well as those that want to come here from out of state. So for me, it's kind of a win-win thing. Depending on how much commission recommends, I'm certainly in support of a increased fee.
Yeah, and if I could just reiterate. The access portion, we have not really been a part of. We've always done land acquisition, like I said, through other projects that have come to us. So with this, we'd be in a driving seat to promote that access. That's now a huge deficit in the entire southern part of the state.
Jerry.
Do you want to comment on the stocking? I think part of the goal with the habitat program is to enhance habitat so that maybe in some areas we're less reliant on stocking, and that we can have, you know, wild populations that anglers can enjoy and not have to increase stocking in places. So I think that's an important part of the habitat account.
From a 30,000 foot level.
Understand.
As across the state, whether we're stocking more up north or less down south or what we're doing, but the concept that we need more money to go forward to be sustainable, so that people can enjoy what we have to offer.
Commissioner Hodgson.
I'll make a motion that the commission endorse the increase to $5 in the fisheries habitat fund.
We have a second?
Fee, right?
Second.
Second?
Discussion?
Yep.
Yeah, a last comment. I know the strategic plan committee and everybody's working diligently to look at sustainability and how we move forward. I assume these types of discussions have probably or will probably be part of that committee of how we fund ourselves going forward in the future. Is that a correct assumption?
If I may.
Yep.
So, yes, the committee did not make a recommendation on this, but our committee meeting last Friday, this was one of the issues that we discussed. And so, yes, the answer is yes.
We also have expenditure authority over these accounts. Commissioner Green.
Did I hear the amount, Chris, was $5?
Increase it to $5.
Okay.
Correct.
My other question is, what type of a, I don't want to say guarantee, but a commitment We're trying to improve the southern part of the state. Are we gonna see out of that?
I think you have a department that's very motivated to do that if they have the
That's the
resources.
memo on that. What, I have watched for 3 years, in my area alone, the fishing decline. Not only through access, but the stocking. It has been like it's more or less going after just the native brook trout. My county, there's a lot more fishermen down there that aren't fly fishermen. I'm asking if we're gonna get any type of a commitment.
I can guarantee you that we will take every opportunity to look at where the highest priority needs are and assess them and use the money to the best of our ability. We'll be coming back to you to expend the funds, so you will have a chance to actually vote on what projects get passed through.
Any more questions? If not, I'm gonna call us to vote. All in favor of the motion to recommend that we increase the fishery habitat fee to $5, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. I want to thank on both of these presentations how the strategic plan keeps getting tied in on the presentations. That's much appreciated for this commission and the work we put into that to make sure that we're sticking to it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Diane, I think you've got a remarkable young man that's going to be working for you. And, well,
good job.
whatever his name is, welcome
Jared.
aboard.
Jared. Thank you, Jared.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next item. Both the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Division will provide an overview of the fiscal year 27 wildlife habitat, game management, and fisheries habitat account budgets.
Dan Bergeron, I'm the chief of the Wildlife Division. I'm going to go over the two dedicated accounts within the Wildlife Division. So it's the Wildlife Habitat account and the Game Management account. I appreciate the commission's support in raising those fees. So now I'm going to go over what we're currently spending some of those monies on. You'll likely recall that last year in July, we brought forward as an information our FY 2026 budgets for these accounts. And then in August of 25, the commission voted to approve those. So we're doing that again for the FY 27. So we're bringing this to you as information item. And then we'd come back again next month. That would give you opportunity to inquire and ask questions, even beyond this meeting today. You all have this in your handouts, I believe, so it should be easier to follow along on that than it is the screen. This is not, unfortunately, a nice presentation like Jared's and Jim's with pictures. It's pretty boring. So I'm just going to go through this. So for the Wildlife Habitat account, you'll note down at the bottom, it gives the total budgeted amount for the year, which is $668,000. $668,037, and then there's a breakdown of where that money comes from, right? So a little over $450,000 is federal funds. There's money from the Connecticut Lakes Natural Area Endowment Fund, and then as we just talked about today, there's that habitat stamp, which is about $160,000, and then there's the $5,000 roughly on the interest. So that's where all the money from this budget comes from. If you look at the table, you'll see these different class lines within the Wildlife Habitat account budget. And what I'd like to do is just go down those class lines and give you a description of what the money in these different class lines gets spent on. So class 010 there at the top, so that a little over $67,000. There is one full-time position that is funded out of the Wildlife Habitat account. That is our habitat biologist, so those funds there cover that individual salary. And that individual does a lot of the management, some of the mowing of our different properties. They help with some of the infrastructure projects. So that is the one full-time position that is actually paid out of this account. You'll see class 020 is a small amount for office supplies. You have 022, which is for the copier over in that office. You'll see 029, that's an internal administrative fee that is paid for the overhead for, say, our business division and the likes to help us do the work. Without our business division, without our federal aid staff, we wouldn't be able to do any of the work to administer this. You know, a lot of what comes into this account is the federal funds through the PR dollars. And again, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes by both our business division and our federal aid staff. Beyond that, you'll see there's a pretty small equipment line for $2,000. That covers, so our equipment line is anything over $250 is charged as equipment. We have a small amount budgeted in there for small equipment like chainsaws and trimmers. If we had larger purchases that were not anticipated or came up, we would bring those back before the commission if it was above and beyond this amount, which we may be doing in the future. You'll see class 033, that's land acquisition. So this actually right now, the money budgeted there is not for land acquisition. It's really for due diligence on properties. So appraisals, appraisal reviews, environmental hazard assessments. As Jim had pointed out in the presentation, you saw that for the land purchases, the match that we needed was 10 times what we get for that habitat fee. So a lot of the land that we're purchasing right now, we're actually not utilizing the wildlife habitat account for the match. We're utilizing federal funds and then partner match. So we need to do that to stretch the federal dollars as much as we can. If we do have land purchases that would use wildlife habitat account money as match, those would come back before the commission as a separate item. If we keep going, there's a very small amount, $458, to cover any audits of these accounts, which we seem to be getting on a more and more frequent basis. Class 049, that $35,000 is what has historically paid for the Conservation Land Stewardship Program for easement monitoring for the properties, for several of the properties that we have. You may all recall that program is now housed within the Fish and Game Department. So I do believe there's some discussions internally about how that might play out in the future. But that's what we've had budgeted for easement monitoring. You'll see class 050, that funds one seasonal wildlife management area land manager. So we do hire one seasonal staff kind of through the spring, summer, and I think a little bit into the fall to help with some of the work that we do, because again, as Jim pointed out, we have a pretty limited staff for the number of acres that we're trying to keep up with. You'll see class 060, there's about $28,000 in there. Those are the benefits for our full-time staff member. Class 070, there's a small amount for trainings for staff. So some of this is certification for like our land surveyor, and then we have some other trainings for our staff. $2,000 is a pretty small amount budgeted for training to make sure our staff are kind of up to date on the most current knowledge. Jim had mentioned this, so class 070, there's $40,000 budgeted for our small grants program. That's what we've been doing kind of on an annual basis, around $30,000 to $40,000 for the small grants program. Class 080 is out-of-state travel, so again, a relatively small amount. Those funds are largely to send our habitat biologists to the New Hampshire Habitat Technical Committee, their annual meeting. Most of our staff go to annual regional meetings where similar staff from other states can kind of share knowledge and experiences and learn kind of what's going on in the region, and a lot of positive information ends up coming back from those meetings on similar issues that are kind of being dealt with across the region. Class 304, research and management. So this is the largest in the budget, and really what this covers is most of the management and maintenance on our wildlife management areas. So road repairs, parking areas, mowing, all those different things. And I think a number of you have been out on some of our properties to witness some of the work that we do. And Jim gave a great presentation that kind of highlights some of that work. But again, $300,000 is a pretty small amount, given the amount of work we did. So it always impresses me how far they're able to stretch the money that we do have. And then lastly, Class 305, acquisition and management. Right now, that's a small amount, that $30,000, and that's just for boundary line maintenance of our existing properties. So that makes up that's what makes up our wildlife habitat account budget for FY27. And I'm not sure how we want to do this, if we want to go account by account. They are just information items at this point, but do the whole thing? All right. Moving on. All right, our game management account. So we were not asking to increase any fees here, although maybe in the near future. Same thing. So this account is, there's $10 that comes off of every bear, moose, turkey, and waterfowl license that's sold. $10 of those licenses goes into the game management account. It's another dedicated account. And this funds all of the game management work that we do in the state. So this is everything from deer, bear, moose, turkey, small game, fur bear species. All of that gets funded out of this account. Virtually everything that we do. So at the top here, you'll see Class 018. There's a overtime. There's an overtime budget line here. This is very specific to really a few annual things that we do. So it's deer check, deer biocheck, moose biocheck, pheasant stalking, because all these things are happening at the same time of year, and we have limited staff to do this. So we tend to prefer to, when possible, pay overtime as allow staff to accrue comp time, particularly with the limited staff that we have. And there is a small amount that, at least the last few years, was budgeted for bear conflict work, although we haven't paid, we typically don't pay this much out in the overtime. It's really dependent on kind of when the seasons are falling, and we've increased some of our human bear conflict work, and we've added an additional tech, and we also work with USDA Wildlife Services. So we really haven't been paying out any overtime for the most part for bear human conflict work, or human bear conflict work, I like to refer to it as. Class 019, that's holiday pay. The only time that ever gets paid is if a biocheck day falls on the holiday, so that just varies depending on how the calendar is going to fall. Again, a relatively small amount. So Class 020 current expenses, we have $85,000 budgeted there. A lot of this covers all the publications we do, the wildlife harvest summaries, the small game harvest summaries, the surveys, all the different surveys we do that we send out. There's some for office supplies, but this also covers, this is where the dam maintenance fees for the wildlife related dams gets paid out of, is out of that class line. Class 026, we pay for a Bearwise program out of here. That's a national kind of educational program that's designed around human bear conflict. So it's information for the public to learn how to deal with that. And it's nice because it's a national program so that all the states are kind of speaking the same language, and it's easy for folks to follow no matter where they're kind of coming from. It does say the AFC, which is the Atlantic Flyway Council, that actually we are not paying dues for that anymore. There was a recent change in how that is administered. There's a separate grant for the flyway work now, so we're actually no longer paying dues for that. However, when this budget was put together, those dues were still budgeted in there, but that's changed. And then the other thing that gets paid out of there is we pay into the wildlifehelp.org website, which is a resource that we utilize fairly regularly. It's a resource that the public can go to kind of help themselves through human-wildlife conflicts. And again, that's kind of a regional effort where a lot of states in the Northeast in particular pay into that website. Class 029. So this is one of the larger class lines. So you see there's $325,000 in there. The bulk of that is salaries for our game biologists. So that we transfer money from this account into 2150, which is our general wildlife account, and that's where all of our wildlife staff and our game staff, or the majority of our wildlife staff and game staff are paid out of. So that money is a transfer over to pay for game staff salaries. And then that also includes the administrative fee that I'd referenced for the wildlife habitat account. This account has that same administrative fee that helps cover overhead for federal aid and business staff. Equipment, you'll see there's an equipment line here. So this covers field gear for staff. We try and do about one vehicle replacement per year here, and there's also we have a lot of equipment for wildlife conflict work that's paid out of here. The bulk of the money in that account, however, is for we try and do one vehicle replacement a year. We'll go down. Land acquisition, you'll see there's $100 in there. We do have the ability to pay for land acquisition out of this account. However, it's rarely been done. It's never been done since I've been here. But we do have a placeholder there of $100 just to keep it open. It's more of an accounting thing than it is anything else. Again, there's a small amount, $669 in 041 for any audits. We have budgeted in 046 under consultants. You'll see there was $20,000 budgeted in there to potentially do an additional public input survey. We had done this in actually it was prior to 26 for when we redid the big game management plan. You're all aware that we're going to be looking to put together a fur bearer plan as well. So this could potentially be money that would be used for a survey to inform that process. 049, there's $2,000 in there. That is for the Granite system. So that is the statewide GIS clearinghouse. The Wildlife Division pays into that. So that's where some of the information for the interactive maps we have, but really all of our staff utilize this. This is where we get all the land cover data, wetlands information. So it's critical information for us to be able to utilize to better manage habitats and the associated species. The information in this GIS database is widely used in the State Wildlife Action Plan and the Big Game Plan, and also in kind of planning out habitat purchases as well. Class 050, so this is what I was talking about before. There's $30,000 in here. That covers 2 seasonal bear techs. And has really helped us be more responsive to the public and minimize human-bear conflicts. It's been a huge relief to our staff. Our former bear biologist, Andy Timmons, got out just a little too soon because this happened pretty much right after he left. So, but it's been a huge help to have an additional staff person to deal with those throughout the state, because you can imagine one individual kind of running all over the state of New Hampshire was not very efficient. And then that ends up freeing up more time for other staff who also assist with some of that work. 060, again, those are the benefits for our game staff. You'll see in 070 there's a small amount for, again, travel. We have about $1,500 in there for travel, in-state travel, which is typically trainings. And then 080 is out-of-state travel. So this, similar to the Habitat program, all of our game staff, all of our project leaders are part of technical working groups. So there's a deer technical committee, a bear technical committee. There's a Northeast moose working group. So all of our staff, at least on an annual basis, go to these regional meetings to kind of figure out what's the most current research that's going on in the region, what are other states seeing in terms of population trends and other issues. So again, that's what that pays for, is for staff to travel to those annual meetings. And then the largest class line, 304, that's our research and management. So this covers really all the research we're doing, the fisher research, the turkey banding work that we're doing, the fur bearer research that with the camera traps that we're doing. There's some moose research, some continued moose research. This also covers our tooth aging and analysis for all of our harvested, not just harvested, but all of the black bear mortality that we encounter in the state. It's disease testing and surveillance. Our CWD sampling is paid out of here. This covers cooperative waterfowl banding work that's done along the Atlantic Flyway. So that's quite a bit of work that's covered under there. And one thing that I'll point out with a lot of this work, but in this class line in particular, so most of this work that we do is federally reimbursed at a 75% rate. A lot of the research that we do, UNH provides the match. So while we need to have the money in the account to cover these expenses, we get, for the larger research projects through UNH, those come at no cost to the agency because it's federal funds and UNH provides the match through salaries of their professors. So while it's a big class line, most of that gets reimbursed to the agency. And then you'll see below, same breakdown, you'll see the federal funds make up the majority of that. We get a fair amount of interest in the game management account because the fund is fairly large, and then the actual game management account funds that are budgeted to be used for FY27 is about a little over $600,000. And with that, I can move on to fisheries. Or I won't move on to fisheries. All right. Thank you.
All right. Hello again, everyone. Jared Lammy, fish habitat biologist. So this is the budget for fiscal year 2027 for the fisheries habitat account. Most of these line items I feel are pretty self-explanatory, so I won't go down line by line unless anyone has any particular questions. You can ask, but I do want to draw your attention to a couple specific line items. One being 020, which is current expense, and that is our DES dam registration fees. So as you're all aware, Fish and Game owns many dams, and we're responsible for paying these dam registration fees to the Department of Environmental Services. Last year, those fees doubled. So we now pay $25,000 per year for that. Additionally, the last line item, 073, grants non-federal, that is the contributions to projects that the commission approved at the June 2025 meeting. So if you remember, it's the 3 dam removals and the fish ramp at Chicora Lake. So that's $300,000 of that, and then the other $75,000 will be potentially for a project that my colleague Ben Nugent will be presenting later this meeting. I also want to add that we receive just over $144,000 in federal match, and that goes towards salaries. So that would be personnel services, permanent, as well as the benefits for those positions. So that gets matched partially with federal funds. Does anyone have any specific questions?
That was the fee that was budgeted during the budget cycle for the dams, the current expenses.
Correct.
The current fee is actually $54,000 now.
Oh, okay. That's good to know.
Is that correct?
Well, it's 54,000.
Yes, totally.
Part of that is the game management.
Game management.
And part of that
Right.
is the fishing side.
Right.
Yes.
So
That's the edited amount.
that is the edited amount for your account.
Correct.
Thank you. So the total for our agency is $54,000 for these dam removals.
Commissioner Temple.
How much of a shock was that to you to find out that it had doubled?
It was a complete shock. We didn't get any headway that was going to happen, and then it did happen. It passed and it happened, yes.
This happened to me at a community level. And I about fell out of my chair that no one was ever notified.
No.
And I assume Fish and Game was not notified that all of a sudden we're gonna double our fees to you?
We were, go ahead, Kathy.
I was actually reading HB2, and that's how we found out.
That's how we found out.
Yeah.
Reading HB2.
And unfortunately, by the time you're reading HB2, the budget has passed.
Yes.
So there's no ability for you to go in and change your budget and increase the appropriation to meet this cost.
Yes. And unfortunately, I just added a note, I did reach out to DES to see if there was some sort of arrangement that we could make for at least this initial year. And they're tied legally. They can't do any sort of adjustment to it, so.
Well, that's interesting. I've seen different places be totally blindsided. I didn't realize our own state was blindsiding our own agencies with that maneuver. But hopefully in the future, we'll be able to do that. I don't know how many dams this includes, but for what you get for $54,000, I think we'd all be shocked at what we get for $54,000. I'm sure there's a dam inspection, maybe two, tell you to go what to do, cut these trees, and the culvert looks bad, and the riprap's not right.
How often they're inspected.
I'm sorry?
It depends on their hazard, so different dams have different hazard classes, some are high hazard, some are lower hazard. The exact fee we pay per dam depends on that, and how often they're inspected.
So the gist of my question is, what dams do we have that are in the critical stage? Do we have any that are high hazard that has to have something done?
Yes.
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 And what's the fee of that?
Those fees are $3,000 per year for those dams.
I'm sorry, what was that?
$3,000 per year.
And
For the high hazard.
to be fair, we work very closely with DES on these dams and the maintenance and the removals and all of that. It's a great working relationship. And that's why we were a little surprised when it kind of came through HB2, not really having had that previous conversation to be able to prepare for it. But I don't know if they were even able to prepare for it, honestly. So I'm not sure how it all came about, but.
Well, the idea is that some of these high hazards eventually are going to need repair. And I assume it'll be in the millions of dollars.
Well, there'll be repair or there'll be removal. I mean, there's a lot of benefit for our wildlife species with dam removal. So that's what we're looking to do, is maybe remove those that we can that are beneficial for wildlife resources, fish and wildlife resources, and then thereby reduce our fees.
One of those high hazard dams are in my town, and I've went to a number of the meetings now with Fish and Game and DES just to listen in, and it's been my understanding is that they're going to look for state funding, not us to pay for it, because Merry Meeting Dam is in the it's in the millions of dollars to resolve the issue. So.
Well, we all get caught up in it when one fails.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we know what that means.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
I have a request for staff. When this comes back as an action item, can you add two columns? One column that shows what the FY26 approved amounts were, what the YTD spend has been, and then obviously the request, so that we can see how the request for the classes have changed year to year, and whether you spent it all last year or where we are with that. I think that would be helpful.
Commissioner Titone.
On expenses for 010, that covers 2 salaries. And for the benefits on 060, is that the same 2 salaries, or are there more included in that?
Just those two.
That's 2. So that's like, benefits are 85% salary, yeah?
Excuse me, it also includes the benefits for your part-time class teachers. Payroll benefits.
Do you hear that, Jim?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have a question? Oh, I thought I saw you put up a hand. Any other questions? All right. This is going to be on the agenda next month for our approval, so everybody knows. Thank you again, Jared. Our next item is an overview of the future action item for Inland Fisheries Division to support a project to permanently conserve 40.6 acres along the West Branch Warner River. And a quick note, the officers and I discussed with the director about going forward on any of these projects is to invite whatever commissioner the county these projects are in to visit the properties so that they can get a hands-on approach to each one and can report back to the commission, what they learned. When there's situations where maybe a commissioner can't go, we're going to either pass that on to either an officer going or maybe to the infrastructure committee from somebody on that committee to go and do that. But that will allow us to be a little more involved in these projects, which obviously we tend to have a lot of questions about these, rightfully so, and hopefully open up some more transparency. With that, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ben Nugent. I'm a fisheries biologist. I'm based out of the Region 2 New Hampton office, where I do spend a lot of time working with our large lake fisheries. During the off period of those responsibilities, I have some opportunities to work with various partners and form collaborations to assess the status of wild brook trout and work for looking at our opportunities to protect and restore wild brook trout populations throughout central New Hampshire. One of the projects I've been able to dedicate a lot of time to over the course of 15 years is an ongoing effort in the Warner River watershed. And over the course of that period, we've generated a lot of local interest and brought on board several different partnerships and volunteer groups and collected an immense amount of fisheries data for this particular watershed. Up to this point, well over $1 million has been allocated in monitoring brook trout in this watershed, land protection projects, and some select restoration projects throughout the watershed. And this is the first opportunity we're presenting the Commission with a need to fund a project within the Warner River watershed using fish habitat accounts. So we're focusing on a property in Bradford, New Hampshire. This is locally called the Webb property. It has a long history of being managed as a hay field. You could see the majority of the northern portion of the field, very level, really accessible to farming equipment. The northern property boundary abuts Pleasant View Drive. As you move more towards the central part of the property, you'll see a vegetated island of mature trees, and then the topography of the property kind of decreases and drops down into the floodplain of the West Branch Warner River there. And you can kind of make out the main stem river. It's meandering throughout that area. And then the property continues to encompass the southern portion of the riparian area there. And below that property is another privately owned parcel, and the neighboring property there you can kind of see is encroaching on the riparian area. And after learning about this potential conservation project, they've expressed interest in returning some of their field into a vegetated strip again to make the brook trout and other species more protected. So with this particular project, we've assembled a broad partnership, and some of these partners are represented here today. I'd like to introduce Emily Nichols. She's the program manager for the Aquatic Resource Mitigation Program at DES. Andy Deegan, he's a representative from Osmond Sargent. And Greg Swick, he's the conservation chair of the Basil Woods Trout Unlimited chapter. It's based out of Concord, but
Sure. We want to thank you for this partnership here.
thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. Basil Woods Trout Unlimited has been a consummate partner throughout the 15 years of our being involved within the watershed. And the amount of support they provided through volunteer assistance is unparalleled throughout New Hampshire. But initially, the way we envision this potential project to, I guess, materialize or shake out, Osmond Sargent, is seeking to acquire this particular property and become the landowner in perpetuity. The town of Bradford and their Conservation Commission will be the easement holder. They'll hold the conservation easement with all the restrictive language. for the property. It kind of creates a third party to monitor, everything going on. We've brought on board North Point Engineering. One of their principal engineers is a member of Basil Woods Trout Unlimited, so that just inherently he has a vested interest in seeing this project to fruition. And again, we have such a core established group of volunteers. Throughout the course of our history in this watershed, volunteers have allocated over 6,000 hours of volunteer time, and it's unbelievable. It's usually just me and an army of volunteers. I've never been shorthanded to do any of this work there. So, and the Merrimack County Conservation District's on to provide support and potentially facilitate some projects as we proceed with this project. So just a couple quick specific details of the property. Again, it's 40.6 acres, and it encompasses close to 2,000 feet of river frontage containing the riparian area on both sides of the West Branch Warner River. Again, it's very flat. It has a lot of road frontage. It's highly praised and sought after for potential development and being subdivided for housing. It's hard to display it, but it has an iconic view of the Sunapee Mountain ridgeline and some other hillsides. It's a gorgeous area. We have a lot of information from other areas within this particular drainage, but we did confirm wild brook trout to be present there in this past summer. And throughout the course of the Warner River project, I've measured close to 4,000 brook trout throughout the whole drainage, and we found the third longest brook trout within this particular property last summer. The West Branch Warner River is large enough where there are no barriers. It's too big to have culverts. It's all bridges, so fish and other aquatic resources can move freely in and out. And if you ever want to produce larger brook trout, having access to preferred habitats and the ability to move freely is one of the key components of doing that. The property is also encompassed by a stratified drift aquifer, and despite its kind of wetland appearance, it stays very cool throughout the summer. We put out a water temperature logger last summer that recorded hourly water temperature, and despite being one of the warmest summers and driest summers we had last year, the average water temperature was maintained at a nice, cool, acceptable for brook trout 65 degrees. So, and converse to that, because it has such a groundwater contribution, in the wintertime, that groundwater actually warms the stream temperature. So it allows brook trout eggs that are deposited in the stream to hatch quicker, to start feeding, and it gives them an advantage over other species that may not be born in this kind of warmer water in the wintertime. So. Just a general overview of the greater Warner River watershed. You can kind of see the arrow pointing to where the property is. This is just in Bradford, but just to the north of there is the town of Newberry town line. Essentially, 99% of this watershed is in Merrimack County. There's small pieces of Goshen and Washington in Sullivan County make up the very western extent of the watershed. But essentially, the West Branch Warner River drains the hillsides of the Mount Sunapee Range, flows into the town of Bradford, where it meets up with the outlet of Lake Todd, and that's the origination of the Warner River itself. Flows through parts of Sutton and then Warner, Hopkinton, before it flows into the Kentucook River. So just an illustration of the level of information we have for this particular watershed. This amount of fish data and stream crossing assessment data for a watershed of this size is unparalleled for New Hampshire. We don't have this type of information anywhere else to the level of this. And, the blue dots indicate areas where we found wild brook trout. Red dots are areas where we did not find brook trout. And the yellow dots are areas where we assessed the culvert or bridge to see if fish could swim freely through them and to see how vulnerable those particular stream crossings are to washouts during high flow events. But in general, about 2/3 of the streams have wild brook trout here. The targeted property is a 4th order stream, And throughout New Hampshire, having brook trout in a fourth order stream is fairly rare. So having it in southern New Hampshire is pretty unique, and we're happy we could present this opportunity to the commission today. So, okay, here's zooming in a little bit more closer to the property. This shows the number of wild brook trout. I'm sorry, you can't read the numbers that well. That were caught within a 100-meter survey location in the general area around the targeted property. And the green blocks are areas that have been previously conserved. And I guess the nice thing about where we're focusing on now is that the headwaters of this particular area has a lot of intact conservation land at its current point, and having, you know, a new conserved area slightly downstream kind of extends our footprint. It kind of gives us a target to really focus on future conservation efforts in that corridor. If you were able to trace up the main stem river a little bit, the first green block you would see is a very similar project where we worked with the Aquatic Resource Mitigation Fund, Basil Woods Trout Unlimited, and Osborne Sargent in 2020 and received aquatic resource mitigation funding and conserved 88 acres. So in essence, this is a very similar project that what we've done in the past. And the northern tributary that enters just below the property with all those dots kind of isolated, that's one of the highest density brook trout streams we've found over the 15 years of doing survey efforts here. And the numbers are very impressive. You know, 110, 107 brook trout found in a 100-meter stretch of stream. So in addition to strictly conserving the property, there's been some identified needs to do more habitat enhancement to the property. We could really increase the value and function of the property by incorporating other practices beyond just protecting the land. And some of these examples include, you know, creating or differentiating between the mowed area to the north. I think there's still an intention to keep some of that portion to the north along that road mowed as a hay field, and then an established no-cut, no-mow zone will be made about 150 to 200 feet beyond the existing that vegetated island. To catalyze or increase the frequency of trees, the speed of trees reestablishing, we're hoping to utilize volunteers and purchase tree and shrub material and do plantings, particularly along the corridor where it's been hayed for so long that there's currently no trees there. We hope to fell trees and strategically place them to provide enhanced fish habitat for brook trout and other species like wood turtles that have been documented on the property. Historically, a former landowner installed a bunch of hard armoring riprap along some of the bends of the river, and we hope to utilize volunteers to remove that riprap and allow the river to function more naturally and have access to its floodplain again and provide benefits to floodplain habitats and dissipate erosive flow energy by spreading laterally. There's a few invasive terrestrial plant species that we'd like to target removal of. These are most likely brought in through mowing equipment. And all in all, this will be done with the assurance that hunting, fishing, outdoor recreation opportunities will still be maintained in perpetuity for this property. Osborne Sargent allows those activities to occur on all their properties, and if funded through the fish habitat account, I'm sure the grant agreement will have some sort of language, but either way, the guaranteed access for fishing, hunting, and outdoor recreation will be codified by going through with this project. So this project has several nexuses to several of the strategies identified in the department's strategic plan. A lot of these have been brought up before, but clearly there's the conservation enhancement have a direct connection or in concert with several of these strategies. But maybe one thing that we haven't brought up from a fisheries perspective before is the value of working with private landowners. And Osborne Sargent will be be the private landowner, but this will give an opportunity to do work on privately owned property that are still accessible. It's nice, Osbon Sargent has expressed an interest in doing enhancement on other properties within their region, and so I think there's this might be a good way to foster, you know, future projects throughout that portion of New Hampshire that Osbon Sargent maintains a project area. Because we have so much information from this area, you know, we're able to effectively prioritize what good, meaningful projects would be. And I wouldn't be here presenting this opportunity if I didn't truly believe that this has a great amount of value in doing it. And it also will extend hopefully our expanded conservation focus on the West Branch Warner River. A couple different elements within the strategic plan that may be in concert with our actions here. Again, access will be assured for various outdoor recreation. And this one kind of hasn't been brought up, but I think given the different enhancement components of this project, there's a lot of opportunity to collaborate with our Wildlife Division, even our Aquatic Resource Education Division at Public Affairs, you know, to partner and collaborate more and work to provide the best product available. Just a quick rundown of the current budget and the numbers where we are to date. It's estimated only to acquire the property is $475,000. To do the enhancement work, again, a lot of this will be through volunteers, is about $50,000. And that mostly will be for permitting, you know, planning, a contracting fee. And so this gives a total project cost of $525,000. If you were to look at the proposed or the requested $75,000 from the fish habitat account, that's 14.3% of the overall project cost. And if it's awarded, I think there's potential to use that $75,000 to leverage the needed remaining funds that the Osbon Sargent's looking to get to cover up the lapse in funding. And initially, we requested $275,000 from the Aquatic Resource Mitigation Fund for this project. They had multiple projects that they didn't want to not award funding to, so they knocked down our grant award to $200,000, and so that's where that $75,000 lapse is, and that's why I'm here today with that amount. So I'll just close off with, you know, an example of what the property looks like. It's you could tell it is ideal for subdivision. You know, very flat. The aquifer can, you know, generate, you know, good wells for drinking water. A lot of road frontage. There was another property of similar size that had a lot of wetlands, and it was more challenging to develop, but that recently has been subdivided, and it's on the market now. So it just illustrates the demand for housing in this particular area. But I'll leave it at that if there's any questions.
Go ahead, Commissioner Stoll.
I got a couple of questions. Thank you for the presentation, first of all. This is in Bradford, correct?
Yeah.
And Bradford is just west of Concord here?
Yeah.
So maybe this will quiet down the belly aching from some of the... That they got a project now that's there, you know. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, we've done a lot of other stuff, but because we didn't need the fish habitat account funds, or we didn't have enough from the fish habitat account funds, the commission may not have been aware of it too. So a lot's been going on, but this is the first time we're presenting a need for help.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission?
Can't get there from here.
It's not easy.
It's all Merrimack County, not Sullivan County, it's Merrimack County.
It is Merrimack County. And Chris, you're going to be visiting?
Well, Commissioner Stoll, we appreciate your kind words.
Are you following?
Any other questions? Not seeing any? We're going to move on to additional business. We have one item to add under additional business related to falconry rules, which was just a kind of minor oversight that we're trying to clear up.
Thank you.
And I'll pass off to the director for that.
Thank you, Chairman.
And thank you for the presentation.
Yes, thank you, Ben. Good job. So on this item, as you may have heard, that we're conducting a public hearing for the waterfowl, the 2026-2027 migratory bird hunting season. And as a reminder, our season dates must fall within a federal season framework that's established by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. But within our migratory bird seasons, we have falconry season. And we always ensure that those dates are outside of the active waterfowl hunting periods. But falconry actually has a nexus to you all. So because we're moving forward, we have a hearing on Wednesday, March 25th for the season settings, the season dates. This year what we're proposing is, because of the shift in the calendar and such, the falconry season dates will shift by 2 days, only in the inland and Connecticut River zones. And we consider this pretty much a de minimis adjustment. However, again, because it's under the commission or with the commission's purview, if you feel otherwise, you can either take action today, or we can bring the item back in April, or if you're comfortable with the proposed changes, we can just ask for your approval to move forward with the rule changing. I just wanted to bring it to your attention because it was an oversight when we were doing the waterfowl, and I realized falconry was in there. And we wanted to bring it to your attention that, hey, this actually has a nexus to you guys.
Commissioner Green.
Is this been brought to the public's attention?
Not yet. I mean, we have the hearing on Wednesday, March 25th. That's when we'll bring the rules forward.
That's next week.
Yeah, next
Well,
week.
the reason why I ask, I have several falconry clubs, falconry groups, right in my area.
Yeah, so the dates will change from, they were November 12th through November 24th. It's going to change to the 26th. And it was December 25th through January 23rd, and it's going to change December 27th to January 23rd.
And how does it line up with the, I'm trying to think of the technical term, the federal flyaway zones that they're allowed to take the falcons under?
Yeah.
Is it lining up with those?
Yep,
dates?
it's within the seasonal, yes, framework, yes. Yeah, and it's outside of our waterfowl dates so that falconers aren't worried that they're going to lose or have.
So really, there'll be no drastic change?
No, it's just shifting the dates.
Okay.
That's correct.
By 2 days?
By 2 days, yes.
Is there any other questions? Do all the commissioners kind of understand what we're talking about here? Does any commissioner want to bring a motion forward to approve this, or would you prefer to? All right, I got a motion on the table. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a second. All in favor? Wait a minute, discussion? Anybody have anything else to add? Sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner Green.
I'd rather wait till next month so I can talk to the groups in my area.
All right, I'm still going to have this vote through, and obviously, any other comments? No more discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Not seeing any. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Old business. Ray, I believe you wanted to make a motion, so I'll allow you to make a motion before I start speaking.
I'd like to make a motion to remove, under old business, HB 1603. I want to make a motion to remove it from the agenda.
There's been a motion to remove HB 1603 from the old business agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second from Gene. Open it to discussion. I guess my question would be, I'm curious of why we would do that. This is primarily to update a fiscal note, and I think there was other concerns from, go ahead, Ray.
My reason of removing it is on House Bill 1603. It's already been passed through the House that this commission has voted on with an amendment. To the best of my knowledge, there has been no new amendments attached to this bill. HB 1603 also had its Senate hearing this morning at 9 o'clock. I don't feel the need to bring this before the commission, because what I think is happening here is that they're trying to get the commission to change its mind on the bill.
So,
The bill has gone through the Senate. I don't see a need.
and the bill hasn't fully gone through the Senate for
It has
for
not
clarity of
been
the commission.
voted on.
No, it
It's
has
still
not.
in It went through its second hearing today. Last week it had a hearing. It ended up getting extended into today. It started at 9 o'clock. I had to stop looking at 10, but it was still going on. I don't see a need to even bring this up for discussion.
So why don't you feel the same way about HB 1140?
I'm going to say the bill I'm familiar with.
Okay. Primarily, the reason is that there was information that was not yet available to the commission, which included a fiscal note, which had significant impacts. This is an action item, meaning commissioner could certainly make a parliamentary move for a motion to reconsider if they wanted. But other than this, this is purely an informational review. So, I mean, we're going to call this to vote. My thing is that I think this commission deserves to have all the information. And if it so chooses to reconsider, it should do that. I think everything we've always requested consistent in this commission is to have all the information and also to have our opportunity for input. And I think that this is in honor of that thing. And nothing may come of it, to your point. So, any other comments or discussion on this item? So,
This is just on 1603.
this is a motion to remove 1603 from old business. The motion on the table, not seeing any, no more discussion? The motion on the table is to remove HB 1603 from the informational review under old business. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Can I just get a count? Sorry, guys, I just want to, yeah, if I could just see hands. We have 4 ayes. All opposed? Aye. Opposed? So we have,
So who's opposed? Raise your hands, please. Are you opposed? You're kind of wavering. Thank you.
is it 1, 2?
I saw 5.
What was the number?
You too.
That's two.
So opposed, I have Trahan, Chris, Temple, AJ, and Jim. Is there, and Poole? There we go. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 opposed. 4
And what was
favor.
in favor? Just
So the motion fails.
motion fails. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to HB 1140, and I'm going to hand that over to the director.
Yeah, thank you. So we're bringing this information forward today because we didn't have an opportunity to present this at the last legislative committee meeting or the previous commission meeting. And we didn't anticipate that we needed to bring the material forward during that meeting, and we didn't have some of it prepared. So while the commission has already taken action on both of these items, we believe it's important to provide this information to you for your awareness and to ensure that the record at least is complete as far as information and process. So we appreciate the opportunity to provide the information on how each of these amended bills may impact or affect New Hampshire Fish and Game operations and our ability to fulfill our statutory requirements, or how they align with our statutory requirements. Our objective is to ensure that any legislative changes support transparency, collaboration, and maintain the department's capacity to carry out its responsibilities effectively. On HB 1140, all of you should have received an information sheet, which is a 2-page document, front and back, 1 page front and back. In this, it outlines that HB 1140, as amended, requires the department to allow for more equitable access for hunters with legitimate mobility impairments. It provides clear, objective statutory guidance rather than broad discretionary authority, which was originally crafted in the original bill. The original bill as drafted had granted the director the broad discretionary authority to determine whether an individual with a physical disability qualified for the permit to hunt with a motor vehicle or from a motor vehicle. But while it was well-intentioned, it was too broad and provided risk for inconsistencies. This amendment is allowing individuals, it's closing the gap basically. It's allowing individuals with a loss of or use of one lower extremity to qualify for a permit, and it aligns with the spirit of the purpose of the existing statute, which was to offer those individuals with an additional adjustment. The adjustment itself is clear. It provides clear objective criteria for eligibility, so there's no discretionary component to it. And it does not change or expand the program that we currently have, other than to offer it to an additional individual. We did include a little bit of a fiscal estimate here. Given the permit carries a one-time $10 fee, we assessed since 1997, 187 permits have been issued under the current statute, which is more restrictive than the proposed amendment. Digging through some of the national data from the Amputee Coalition, it indicates that about 1 in every 190 Americans lives with a loss of a limb, and that translates to about 4,500 or 5,000 New Hampshire residents. And when we calculate that in turn, looking at the number of residents that actually hunt each year, it equates to about 4 to 5% of our hunting population, which then estimates approximately 190 to 240 hunters may be impacted through this bill. That then turns into, if you estimate the revenue, it's an approximate anywhere from, it's hard to predict who's going to buy, but anywhere from a $30 increase to maybe a $530 increase annually. In conclusion, the bill maintains the original intent and scope of the permit program, and it actually allows the department an opportunity to offer this broader adjustment for other hunters within the state of New Hampshire. Other than that, I don't have anything else. I just appreciate the opportunity to bring that forward to you for 1140. Do you have any questions on 1140 or anything further that you'd like us to dig into?
And just for clarity to the commission, we're currently supporting the amendment of 1140. Is there any questions regarding 1140? Commissioner
So
Chan?
you've covered everything.
Yeah, we looked to see if there was any impact to what we are currently doing. It doesn't seem, the wording is pretty straightforward. It just expands the opportunity by identifying an additional mobility impairment.
And we've already voted to support that.
Correct.
Yes, you have.
Yep,
Yes.
that's your position.
Yep, yes.
Our position.
Yeah, this is just mainly because we didn't have the chance to give you some of this numbers previously to allow for you all to see, just at least have all the information.
The next item is 1603, HB 1603. And I
Yes.
will hand it off to you.
So again, we appreciate the opportunity to bring this information forward as well. You should have received a document, it's multi-pages, that we sent out to everyone. First and foremost, I do want to acknowledge the tremendous value of private landowners. With roughly 70% of the state in private land ownership and 100% of our fish and wildlife resources held in public trust under our stewardship, it's important and imperative that we have strong and collaborative relationships with the private landowners. They're essential to our work. This partnership is literally the foundation of wildlife management and successful wildlife management as a whole. So our points regarding 1603 definitely should not be interpreted as a lack of support for private land ownership. Rather, it should just reflect the commitment to ensuring that policies strengthen rather than strain the work that we do, and you know, it's critical to the work that we do through these partnerships. So with this bill, in particular, the first section, 212A9-3A1, we have noted here that there's minimal to no concerns as written. The only concern that may come up or may surface at some point is if the verification process of records is retroactive. If we just start from the time that the bill is approved and we move forward, then there's no concerns because we can easily put our current internal procedures into a rulemaking process. But however, if it starts to affect the older rules or the older data that we have, that could cause some difficulty for us. Section 212A9 3A2, this is the area where we have particular concerns. Of most concern is probably the cost associated with implementing this section. This section of the bill really requires a substantial amount of ongoing financial obligation for the department. While the rulemaking itself is not necessarily a large cost up front, it's implementing this portion that will cause us some financial strain. And if you look, we did provide a little chart for you to kind of outline some of the components. There were, and I won't read this whole thing, you all have had this, but I'll just summarize. But the key points we identified were increased communication and mailing costs. And the communications and mailing costs, rough estimate, we figured about $25,000 to $45,000 because it will involve initial outreach to landowners. It's going to involve follow-up communications with landowners. It's going to require repeat outreach. We're not really sure how it works when land ownership changes and who's tracking that. If we have to track that, that's going to cause some additional communication and outreach needed. Plus, it's going to cause some, additional administrative work. We also have the need for an expanded database, the data management system and the data storage needs. We would need to redesign the database that we have. The current database does not track land ownership. So to comply with this bill, we definitely need to redesign the database. We'll need to add fields that will include permissions, dates, documentation, expirations, land transfers, things like that. There are several other things that we've listed here. And we estimate that that cost is going to be anywhere from $15,000 to $30,000 without the redesign itself. The redesign and programming may cost $50,000 to $100,000 as a one-time fee, and then anywhere from $15,000 to $10,000 to secure additional storage, and then you'll have ongoing maintenance of maybe $10,000 to $20,000 a year for the IT support. So total costs ongoing can vary a bit on this one. The other item we had was the administrative tracking that I was just discussing as far as tracking and doing the compliance work itself, tracking the permissions, verifying the permissions, making sure that we're responding to public inquiries, managing any disputes that are unclear with permission status. This is more of a sort of a field level person. This will require continuous workload. It's not a one-time task, and so we figured it's going to be at least a half-time, if not a full-time person, and that would range between $40,000 to $60,000 a year plus the benefits, which you already just saw what the benefits are. Then one full-time FTE to manage the compliance and manage this overall system. Basically, this person would be based on the volume of work, but the department would require, I think, at least one person. We saw it with the former environmental review program that we had, where we had to hire the Kevin Sullivan position because of the management and oversight of these projects. So just ensuring the compliance with the RSA, ensuring the coordination with the IT and database, responding to the landowners, supporting the rulemaking and reporting requirements, that will require an additional person. So that's approximately a $100,000 cost. And then there are some other significant factors to concern. I mean, direct conflict with the North American model of wildlife conservation, that wildlife is the public trust. We have operational and data integrity concerns. Some of those are outlined here. If you have more questions about those, we're glad to answer those. We have concerns on impacts for conservation funding and land ownership opportunities in those conservation fundings. I mean, LCHIP, ARM grants, NRCS funding, all of those could be impacted through this process. And then impacts on public participation, citizen science. We use that quite a bit here. I mean, our harvest reporting alone and citizen science for non-game is important. It allows us to cover a broad geographic area using the public. This could potentially set a precedent for broader restrictions. Again, the land ownership training, exchange, the changing of land ownership. If I sell my land and all of a sudden Commissioner Stoll buys it, who's tracking that? That's of concern. One unique thing that I think you need to be aware of is the remotely sensed data. I know some of you are very familiar with remote sensed data. And this bill does raise some questions about, you know, how do we do that? Are we having to obtain permission from every landowner whose property a radio tagged animal crossed over, or you know, a Landsat data set provides that data? Do we have to receive permission for those landowners who are their properties are identified in that Landsat data? It's not clear on the bill, so it's concerning. The other thing I'll just add, I won't read through all of these. The only thing I will add is we have existing processes that allow us to access and work with landowners and get permission, and those procedures have been effective. We've never once denied a permit, even when we were doing the DES work, you know, the DES work that they're doing now, the environmental review. We didn't deny a permit. We've always worked with landowners to avoid them having a take on their properties. So I'm not sure that this bill is really addressing what they wanted, but it does have impacts to us, and that's what's of concern. I mean, we support the intent, you know, clarify the procedure, strengthen the transparency, of course. But as written, the bill would impact wildlife conservation efforts that we're doing, and I just want to at least share that with you. I'm not sure that was conveyed to you when you made your decisions, but that's fine. You know, I just want to make sure you have it now so that you know as we move forward the things we're going to be facing if this bill passes.
Do commissioners have any questions for the director regarding this information? Commissioner Poole.
So, does this bill allow, I've received two opinions on this, and I'm looking for the department's opinion. Does this bill allow any latitude in this rulemaking process for someone that either refuses permission or doesn't respond to requests for permission for the agency to write a rule that would say, okay, like other agencies in the state, you have to go for administrative warrant, some process that would, does this bill allow that latitude?
We would have to write it into rule.
Flat out?
We would have to write it into rule.
But you believe that this bill allows, so the department's position is the bill allows that?
I think if we wrote it into rule, I'm not sure we can get it passed through rule, but if we wrote it into rule, I think we might be covered. And to be, I mean, I'll look to the colonel who reads laws all the time. Is that accurate to say that, or am I misspoken here?
It's gonna, that's a good question.
It is a good question.
Yeah, and it's gonna depend on how a judge views the probable cause, I guess. So probable cause is normally based on crimes. If the information provided as criminal or civil offense on civil penalties and criminal penalties, then yes, he would issue an administrative warrant. I'm not convinced he would do that based on a goal of seeking information.
I think,
Are you okay speaking to that
I
out
think
loud?
if it's involving a law enforcement officer, that's a different story. So when you're dealing with a biologist, we do not have that authority.
Putting the cart before the horse.
So,
I'm comfortable
one
saying
of our
that.
sister agencies has a process in place.
Yes.
I probably used the wrong word. Does this bill, as it's worded, allow that latitude in sporting rule?
I don't believe it does.
I don't believe it does either.
I don't believe it does, no. Not for
So,
the work that was intended through this bill.
So should Dave Pools not answer your 3 requests by writing, that's a definitive no. You can't go after that, onto that piece of land to get a track fishing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions from any other commissioners? I did have a question. It's my understanding that the law that we're talking about is obviously the New Hampshire version of the Endangered Species Act.
Yes,
that
I'm
was
sorry, I didn't
passed in
clarify that.
1979. I did some homework. In 1990, there was exemptions for timberland and farmland, and I'm
That's
curious
correct.
if that's the case and what that actually means. because a lot of the feedback that I got was that timber harvests were being impeded and various other things. And so I'm seeking clarity on that, because as we're looking at here, it's no secret that this department has budget issues, and we're talking about potentially $250,000 per year going forward on what I believe is a solution in search of a problem. So I guess what I care about private landowners. I also care about timber harvesting and farmland. I mean, they all have significance to our game animals. So I guess my question is, can the department clarify currently what those exemptions exist?
So it's under 212A. There's the restrictions for the agricultural component and forestry lands, and explicitly protects those normal agricultural and silvicultural activities from any interferences. 212A:13. So it says 212A:13, exemptions and restrictions. The provisions of RSA 212A or any rule promulgated under this chapter shall not be applicable to marine or estuarine species of wildlife. Number 2, no rule promulgated under the provisions of this chapter shall cease undue interference, or excuse me, shall cause undue interference with normal agricultural or silvicultural practices. That's where they're protected.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission?
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay. And do you understand the parliamentary procedures available? Can I explain that before we?
Sure.
So this, as Commissioner Green pointed out and Commissioner Stoll, we've taken a position. So the actions here are either a motion for reconsideration, which would bring the original vote from, if it passed, back to vote, or it's, what's the word for the other one?
Rescission.
A rescind, motion to rescind. If you make a motion for reconsideration, you had to have voted positive, for the motion in the first place. So just for clarity, for administrative purposes. Now go ahead.
Make a motion, we reconsider the commission's support of HB 1603.
Where the heck is this coming from? Really?
Well, hold on. Is somebody going to second that? And then, by all means, John, I'll give you an opportunity. Do we have a second for his motion to reconsider?
So moved.
Seconded. John, the floor is yours.
There was a hearing this morning, okay, that I don't think very many people had the opportunity to listen in on. I know I didn't. I know that there were people that obviously the committee thought were important and provided them the opportunity to go and make their presentation, okay? And if what the director just told us is important to the group, I think this morning's testimony is important to this commission. And to call this back after a 9-1 vote, okay, based on, I'm just going to say, speculative numeration is not right. Because nobody at this table, unless somehow you had ears over there, knows what was testified, okay? And I don't know. I listened to the testimony at the first vote hearing.
You mind if I let Commissioner Green?
This goes back to, and I'm going to keep this simple. What this came down to is the fact that landowners were saying, quote, if this bill fails, I am posting my property to no trespassing. What that affects is not only the hunters, not only the fishermen, it also affects the public overall. If the public wants to go walking out on a piece of property just to sightsee, they will have to get landowner permission. What this bill came down about was, because remember, like I testified last month, I've had conversations with the sponsor before this bill even gotten written. And the intent of the bill was, there was too much going on of people saying, there may be this lizard, there may be this turtle on that property, and the property was getting tied up. This is about access, is what this bill is about. It's about asking permission to go on to a piece of property. And as a commissioner, I took an oath to manage the wildlife and to protect access to the public. Not just hunters or fishermen, the whole public. That's what this has come down to, because too many properties have been tied up because somebody said, I think there was a turtle there. This bill is to say, prove it. That's all it's about.
Commissioner Chandler?
Yes, thank you. I will be voting against the motion to reconsider. I'm very content with a 9-to-1 vote of the commission originally. And I just take a little issue with what the director said, and with the words of how much the department is in favor of private landowners, et cetera, and just that the action taken on this bill does not reflect that activity, but that's here and there. Having been involved over the years with much of this, I don't know whether you call it bait and switch, I don't know what I could come up with something, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, if you want to look for the worst case scenario and everything, financially is a good way to do it. And my suggestion here is that the department has come up with the most expensive way of implementing 1603, when I wish they would at least give us a counterpoint by saying, okay, here's the least expensive way we could implement 1603. We have no access, I don't know what that is, and I'm not sure I can figure it out. I'm going to try as best I can, but I just think that the department should be able to give us some better answers. They pick the worst case scenario in every case, as far as I can see, on the cost, and I think that's unfortunate for the landowners of the state, and the sportsmen especially.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, this is not speculation, okay? And the only reason we're bringing it forward is because we did not have the opportunity to bring it forward during the last legislative committee meeting, nor the commission meeting, because there was no discussion that we were going to have this discussion, or intent that there was going to be a vote on it. So it wasn't brought forward then. I do take heed with the idea that this is speculation and we bring up the most expensive manner. That is by far not the case here. Honestly, I could give you a more expensive option, which I don't think is fair for this. That's not my intent here. My intent here is to tell you what the information is, what we can do, and how we can do it. The least expensive option is not to do any of this and allow us just to publish our current procedures and our policy that we use and work with the landowners through that process. I am taking, quite frankly, I'm tired of hearing about all the past, because the past is not where we are. Over the last year and a half, there have been significant changes through the process of using the database and assessing the environmental impacts. Again, I will reiterate, we have never denied a permit. When we were in charge of this program, we never denied a permit. We always worked with the landowners to negotiate, to figure out ways to allow them to avoid take, so they weren't charged $100,000, $200,000 for take, and to allow them to have their project continue on. Now, I find that this is directed honestly, this is targeting Fish and Game. Where are those other agencies? Why is DOT not listed in here? Why is DES? Why is DNCR, who does protected plants, not listed in these rules? This is targeting Fish and Game. Why? Because people keep saying all these things about what we did, what we didn't do, but no one has brought forward, even in the first testimonies, no one has brought forward any fish and wildlife related example. If I had a true fish and wildlife related example, then I'd work with those landowners and figure out what the problem is. But I don't. I don't. And honestly, to ask about, whether or not the least option here, like I said, the first part of this, we can publish, we can make rules out of our procedures. By all means, we can do that. But it's this other component that is it's not clear in the law, and it's very concerning. It brings up some real concerns for our agency, for our operation. We serve everyone.
Commissioner Poole.
So to speak to the motion, the price is not what drove me to make my motion. Two things. One is the point that this would, in my opinion, it would cease to allow, by deference, someone to be able to chase a public resource. In my mind, that's just the way it is. There are other agencies in the state that have processes that were approved by the group of people that say they're going to shut off their land. And that's another thing that I'd like to bring up. And they seem to be fine with it, and I believe that's why that agency was not included in this bill. Last meeting, I was led to believe, after a conversation that I had with the Timber Owner Association representative, that the Timber Owner Association said, this is it, we go the nuclear option. You pass this bill as it's amended, or the timber owners are going to shut off their land. I had about an hour conversation with Jason Stock yesterday. He claims, he never said that to anybody. What he said to me was, we need to have this conversation. This conversation needs to start. There are concerns. And this is the conversation we had yesterday. What can we do to make this work for both Fish and Game and the public resource and the landowners? So that is why I brought up this, because that is not the case. That 1.8 million acres that everybody said was going to be closed is not. That is not the case. This was an effort to make this happen. And to be honest, I think it was misrepresented significantly last month. So that's my issue. The other issue is that I feel very strongly that I made a mistake. I should have asked staff what this was going to cost and what it would cost the department to comply with this. Whether it costs $50,000 for the department or $100,000, $200,000 to get permission, they should be getting permission now. They say they ask for permission. That's what the standard practice says. If we're going to codify that and it costs money to do that, so be it. We should be doing that. That's the landowner's right. For us to say that Dave Poole can say, on my 40 acres, if that fisher crosses into my 40 acres, nope, you're not chasing it. It stays there. I think does the fisher, our responsibility, my responsibility, I'll say mine, is to that resource. And that's where I feel that this fails. And I am led to believe I believe the largest representative of open land in the state of New Hampshire, that this is not the nuclear option. That's not what this was about. There is room for this to have a negotiated end that could be more reasonably approached by Fish and Game and would appease, obviously, the dread. I'm going to use the word dread because that's the only one I remember. The dread resource works for them. That's a group of people that are not law enforcement that, after proving they've got a reason to be there, can be there. So I don't understand why we go from 24 hours before we meet to if we don't vote this in, every piece of land in the state of New Hampshire is going to be closed. I don't get that. If that was that important to every landowner in the state of New Hampshire, they would have come up with an answer before 24 hours before that meeting last month, is my opinion. That's that, and only that, is why I made the motion. It has nothing to do with the cost, although I'm sensitive to the cost of the department. That is why I made the motion.
The other thing for any commissioners that didn't watch the testimony from the House, a significant portion of that testimony was about plant and geological issues that had come up on previous properties, which has nothing to do with our authority as a department. And that represented a significant portion of, to the director's point, examples of where people's land were impacted, but we are not involved in that. That's not our, and as the director said, and I asked, the Timberland Association this question, can you give me a specific example of where these things happened? And I couldn't, nobody could give me one.
Not in the state of New Hampshire is what he said to me.
Exactly.
Give it to the United States,
right.
Different laws. Not in the state of New Hampshire.
Go ahead, Commissioner Cavan.
What things happen? What things happen? You've confused me. What examples are you looking for?
Examples of specifically were people's lands restricted from being built on, which I think the intention of this bill, I think if we pull back and say what's the intent of this bill, I think it's about development. And I'm understanding of that. It's the state of New Hampshire, we have a housing crisis, and I understand we need to move forward on that. And as we know, since the director has come in, it's been a significant topic for us as an agency. This department's not preventing people from building. We're, in fact, comparatively to the rest of the country, very friendly, in my opinion. And I don't understand why we got singled out as an agency about this. And it's going to cost us money, too, in the process. And I guess that's, go ahead, Joe.
So, here's what's troubling to me, because I have kind of been around this sort of thing, okay? And I don't need to make up stories, okay? Let's be clear about that. DES has a policy, okay? And I don't mind dropping the names, okay? When I was heavily involved and president of the New Hampshire Timberland Owners Association, okay, I went to 2 meetings with Tom Burek, who was head of DES for 4 years. Tom's an attorney. I'm not sure if he's retired. He was practicing, I think, in Nashua still, okay? And Tom, all right, and I probably have it right here, he drafted rules that DES would operate by when they wanted to go on private land. And I will tell you, I'm not going to drop the landowner's name. It's not manufactured, it is well known. A large landowner of about 2,500 acres went out on his property, and there was a young lady there with a clipboard and her mountain bike and a backpack. All right, and she was busily writing away, and he questioned her. And she said, well, I'm just taking down the information, I'm collecting data. And he said, really, does the landowner know you're here and you have permission? She said, no, I don't need permission. He said, let me escort you to the gate. He said, because I am the landowner. And that landowner happened to be a very close friend of Tom Burek. Okay, that's what lit up, okay, the list of rules and process that Tom Burek put in place. Okay, when I was employed in the forest products industry, I received 3x5 cards, okay, from what used to be Dread and is now Dancer, okay, and their natural heritage program. Soliciting permission, go on wetland that we might have owned or did own to gather data. This bill is not going to do anything to prevent Fish and Game from doing their work. All it's asking for is this. Please ask for permission, okay? Please do that. You have all of the rights to write the rules, okay? Ask for permission, okay? That's what we want you to do. And nothing in this bill says that you have to purge, okay, the files that you have to date. The rulemaking process and the evolution of this process will allow Fish and Game to determine who they're going to share the information with and how they're going to share it, if they're going to share it. I think that with 2 other agencies in this state, okay, having the courtesy and the respect to go on someone's property and do a taking, because that's what it is, it's a taking, okay, and not want to just ask permission. And I will tell you, on the Fish and Game website, under Kevin Sullivan, okay, Fish and Game is encouraged to ask permission. They are not directed. And I think it's wrong. If anything that Fish and Game is going to say going forward, okay, having permission, all right, information in a database makes it valuable, okay? I don't think this is what I just don't get a hold of, okay? And the numbers, not buying in. I'm not buying into the numbers. I'm not.
Director.
You can do what you choose with this information. It was merely information for you, okay? We're not opposed to putting in a rule. We don't need a law to do a rule. We don't need a law to do a rule. And if that's what we need, is we need some rules written, we can do that. We can write rules, because we have an RSA that allows us to do threatened and endangered species work, right? And we can make rules that outline what our procedures are, our objectives in that work. That's the first thing. The second thing is that
Absolutely not.
I understand what you're saying with all the other agencies, but again, those other agencies are going through the same transition we are, right? But they're not here. They're not in this. Only us. Only our threatened and endangered species law, our rule, everything, our process. It's all under scrutiny. Why? Why does it need to be in the law? Why can't we just do what they did? I mean, we just had an example, right? That's the thing. And this whole point about getting the permission, you know, and whether or not, I said, we don't know whether or not the data would be null and void. And I said that in the beginning. If verification of records moving forward, fine. We're fine with that. That's the first section. But if it does affect the previous records, that's another problem. We have species that come off the endangered species list. And then we have species that go on the endangered species list. And if we have data on those species and they enter the endangered species list, are those data collected prior valid? Those are questions we have. It's just field level questions, right? And this was intended to give you more information. That's all. You already made your decision. I'm wanting to make sure you have the information. I would prefer to do this in advance of you making your decisions, so you can make an informed decision and feel comfortable. And we're not visiting this again, right? But here we are. So I'm hoping that you'll find this helpful, not an aggressor.
Any other commissioners have any comments, questions, concerns? Not seeing any? Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Stoll.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
Director. Since Chris and I have been a commissioner, and we're the oldest sitting commissioners right here, this issue has been hounding this department and this commission. We're on a second governor and second director that has been hounded by this issue. I personally believe that this issue is affecting us budget-wise as far as what we get from the Gold Dome. We lost general funding. I believe this issue had a major impact in that decision over there on funding this. This commission and this department has been under this damn harassment over this particular issue, and it's hurt us pretty bad. I don't know if it's reputable with this governor or not. This governor is watching this bill right now, and I'm pretty sure she's following it pretty tight.
Any other commissioners? So, not seeing any commissioners. The motion on the table right now is for a reconsideration. So what a reconsideration do, just to explain, that would then reopen the original vote that happened at the last meeting, and we would be re-voting on the original vote. So not seeing any more discussion. All in
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, sorry.
I demand a roll call.
Sure. Tanya, if we could do a roll call on this.
Commissioner Poole?
Aye.
Commissioner Titone?
Yes.
Commissioner Hodgson?
Yes.
Commissioner DeRosa?
Yes.
Commissioner Stoll?
No.
Commissioner Trahan?
Abstain.
Commissioner Cavaney?
No.
Commissioner Chandler?
No.
Commissioner Temple?
No.
And Commissioner Green?
No.
I believe the motion fails.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 noes, 1, 2, 3, 4 yeses, and 1 abstention. So the noes have it.
Yep, motion fails. Thank you, everybody, for keeping that relatively civil in a discussion. I think you did a great job with that. All right, next item. Sorry, I got all this paperwork here. Now I got to find where I put this one. We're going to go on to committee reports. We do have a fair amount of committee updates, and obviously we've had a pretty long day so far, so all right. I'm going to let legislative start, just so we can get that out of the way.
It's just going to be a quick one. I'm just going to recognize Melissa. She's just going to enlighten the commission on some bills and how they're going through the legislative process.
Good afternoon, everyone. Melissa Nemeth for the department. So I just wanted to give an update since from the last commission meeting to this commission meeting, what has happened with the legislation we have been tracking. And you all should have a packet in front of you that has the tracker that I email out weekly, as well as a couple of bills that have gone through some amendments, just so you have the full copies of those. But the first category of bills I'll talk about is bills that the House has voted inexpedient to legislate. The first is HB 1018, which would prohibit the use of certain second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides. HB 1045, relative to hunting with lights at night. HB 1058, which would have enabled carrying a loaded firearm on an OHRV operated on private property. HB 1167, enabling the use of ferrets while you're hunting. HB 1238, relative to penalties for the offense of disobeying a police officer. HB 1699, which would have enabled the carriage of certain loaded firearms on slow-moving boats. And HB 1703, which was going to establish some registration fees for bicycles and electric bicycles. The next category of bills that I have a list on is bills that have been passed by the House. HB 1095, increasing the maximum weight of a UTV. There were a few amendments that went around with that bill. Ultimately, the House passed a bill to increase the weight to 3,499 pounds. We already talked about HB 1140. The House passed that with the amendment to enable certain disabled hunters to be able to hunt from a motor vehicle. HB 1216 is about informed consent from law enforcement searches of houses or other property. HB 1348, relative to the possession of human remains for law enforcement training programs. That was one of the bills that has a mirror bill that was also passed by the Senate. HB 1361, the procedure for search warrant inventories, again, mirrors another Senate bill that was also passed. HB 1603 that we talked about was passed by the House, had its first public hearing in the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee last Tuesday, had a follow-up hearing this morning as well. HB 1676, which would limit consumer access to certain high-risk rodenticides. HB 1833 creates a special license for non-resident vessel operators for tuna tournaments. There are two other House bills that the House voted to send to interim study, HB 1410 and HB 1533, which again have to do with electric bicycle classifications. There's an identified an issue with what is to be done with those, and so the idea is to move that to interim study to get more information from all involved stakeholders before putting any legislation through. Additionally, HB 1046 was a bill that would have enabled a person to carry a loaded firearm on a snowmobile on private property. That was passed in the committee, but the House tabled that. And then there was the constitutional amendment that would have made the right to hunt, fish, and harvest game be part of the New Hampshire Constitution. That passed the committee, but it would have required a 3/5 vote in the House to pass. And although the vote was 199 to 128, that wasn't enough to garner the 3/5 majority, so that motion failed. HB 1199 is a bill that would enable the department to charge fees for other agencies using staff, and there's the amendment on that bill that would allow the department to utilize funds from the prepaid license account to support some technological updates. That passed the House. It had its hearing last week in the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and it passed that committee with one small amendment that really isn't substantive. It made it clear that the expenditures from the existing statute allows the interest over 5% to come to the department, and there was language added to clarify that the department, when that comes to the department, that can be used for unrestricted expenditures in accordance with RSA 20638. I mentioned I think I only mentioned 2 Senate bills that the House had corresponding bills for. There were actually 3. SB 409 is about the penalties for the offense of disobeying an officer. SB 410, relative to the possession of human remains for law enforcement training. And SB 411, relative to the procedures for search warrant inventories. Those were all passed by the Senate, have their hearing tomorrow in the House, as does Senate Bill 620, that does not have a corresponding House bill to go with it. And that bill is about the refusal to consent to your alcohol concentration testing and penalties for aggravated driving while intoxicated. So those bills will be heard tomorrow. The only outstanding Senate bill that hasn't had its final action is Senate Bill 448. That is the bill that the first part of the bill changes the definition of veteran and really isn't relevant to this department or commission. The second part of the bill would have allowed a tiered system of discounted lifetime licenses for veterans. The discount would correspond to their percentage disability. That passed the Senate Policy Committee, passed the Senate, went on to the Senate Finance Committee, and in the Senate Finance Committee, the sponsor introduced an amendment to remove the portion that would allow the discounted lifetime licenses for veterans, but they have not had their executive session on that bill yet. And while that wraps up the bills that we are tracking, I did want to bring a couple other items to the Commission's attention with respect to rules. It came to our attention sort of late that FIS 408.02, which is in the Connecticut River Rules for trout, and 410.01 Maine, New Hampshire interstate waters, and what waters are included, that those were going to be expiring. And it's not the whole section of those rules for some reason. These must have been amended previously off track with the rest of the rules. So those small areas were going to expire. And so those are we're going to readopt those without making any amendments to those just to prevent their expiration. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Meeting this morning, one of the most important things that Melissa reported on is Senate Bill 448, which is the Veterans Bill. It stripped away the second part, the bad part that was affecting us. If a disabled veteran, 0% to 30% got, what was it, 25% off or something of a lifetime license. 0%. In other words, they weren't disabled the way the bill was written. That section's been taken right out. It just clarifies what the term veteran stands for. So, very, very good amendment that was done by the Senate. Any questions of Melissa? And none. Thank you, Melissa. Oh.
Which FIS was the
It's
408?
408.02
Yep.
and 410.01, just the introductory paragraph and letter A.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Melissa. That's our report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Stahl. We have 3 more, so who would like to go next? Sustainability?
Sure. So I'm going to summarize the meeting that we had on Friday. We had full attendance of the committee, and Commissioner Green as well. We had 4 issues that the committee discussed. The habitat and fisheries fees were 2 of them. I'm not going to talk about them at all. We had a lot on that today. The 3rd issue was the director shared with us a summary of some possible sort of revenue enhancements, possible process changes that were identified during what I would describe as a senior staff retreat, for lack of a better term. We spent some time reviewing those. She's going to provide to the committee and the commission those ideas, along with information about what would be required to accomplish them, and has asked that we provide feedback on them, a ranking, to provide some input. The 4th item that we talked about as a committee was the interest on the part of the department to update customer relationship management system with what is termed a CRM. And it's essentially software that allows all the various databases that an organization has to integrate them into one software function suite for the purposes of everything from data tracking to marketing to sales to fundraising. And that, if you recall, the commission voted to support House Bill 1199 and the amendment to that, which is sponsored by Representative Spillane, and that would give the department the ability to use some funds from the lifetime license account to withdraw more funds from the lifetime license account to use for priority projects. This is a project that is in discussion for those sorts of uses. So just as a reminder, there's about $4 million in the lifetime license account. A CRM would cost approximately $1 million to $1.2 million. And the current statute allows us to withdraw 9% annually, and interest, if the interest generates in excess of 5% a year, which any of you who have watched interest rates knows that that doesn't happen very often. So think about that lifetime license fund being essentially maxed annually, that we can use about $360 plus or minus $1,000 a year. So, so those are the issues that we discussed. The overarching value or purpose in a CRM program is to make these various department functions, sales, marketing, more efficient. Organizations that have been able to incorporate these into their systems, make it part of their core functions, they see a major flow through in how efficiently they make products and services available, which for us would be selling licenses, those sorts of things. So that was the conversation at the committee. I'll circulate around the minutes from our January 20th meeting, and which the committee approved on Friday, and then the draft for this latest committee, so you can see the larger discussion. But that's an overview of what we talked about.
Any questions for the governance committee? Not seeing any. I'm going to go to public engagement.
I'm going to, in the interest of time, table my stuff until next month.
Okay. Governance committee.
We did meet this morning, and the only thing I would say is I encourage any commissioners that have input, things that they found in the handbook that need addressing, please send them to me, and we'll put them on our work list. We're trying very, very hard to establish that list and get some stuff done in anticipation of voting on version in June. Mayor.
Thank you. All right. Nothing else on committees. I'm now going to go to Seacoast Commissioner.
Spring's right around the corner, supposedly, and a lot of activity starting to pick up down the coast for both recreational and commercial fishing. But they're forecasting snow for this weekend, so who knows. There's two events coming up in April that are going to involve coastal cleanup in New Hampshire. The first one is for the week of April 6th. The Center for Coastal Studies, they're out of Provincetown. They have a NOAA Sea grant, and they're going to be working with, seeking input from local fishermen to do a derelict trap removal behind the Isles of Shoals. So right now there's some known sites that lobstermen have identified, and that's going to be the focus of their activity. The other cleanup is going to be on April 18th. New Hampshire Fish and Game, in partnership with the New Hampshire Commercial Fishermen's Association, are going to conduct their annual coastal cleanup to remove any derelict fishing gear that may have come ashore during these past winter storms. This is an all-volunteer thing by fishermen, and it's been going on for more than 30 years. One of the items that have been brought up by fishermen who do participate in this activity is that fishermen who don't participate, they get $15 tacked on to their fee for renewal of their licenses. A lot of the fishermen who do participate feel that $15 isn't enough of an incentive to get other fishermen to get involved in this cleanup. And they were wondering how we can get that fee increased to $25 or even $50. So I'm not sure what the process would be. You know, if that's something the commission has to approve, or if the director can approve that herself. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Always very informative. Rivers?
Yeah, so the RMAC met for the purpose of reviewing a surplus lands proposal from DOT to dispose of what is known as Bloody Point. So if you're familiar with the sort of Newington-Dover crossing on Route 16, right opposite the Hilton Park on the Dover side, there is, next to where Sprague Energy has their Sprague home, there's a piece of property that includes the old railroad depot, and it's called Bloody Point, and the DOT would like to dispose of the property. And so and I'm not certain where the department is on this currently, but there was some interest on the part of the department and potentially safety to look at the property for public access. So RMAC made a similar recommendation to CORD, which is the larger sort of multi-agency group that determines what to do with surplus property. So they recommended to not dispose of it and to explore the potential for other uses by the state. And this is not RMAC, but I'm aware that Cord met and that they tabled the issue. So I believe it's still a live issue, but I'm not sure what's happened in the last week or so on it. So.
Commissioner reports. Do any commissioners have anything to report to the body of the commission? I know it's been a long day, guys, so I think everybody's ready to kind of pass it off to the director's report.
Okay, I'll try to just hit some highlights. So the Inland Fisheries Division and Hatcheries Program kicked off 2026 with major progress in operations, research, and infrastructure. Inland Fisheries has advanced long-term rule proposals. They reviewed their federal aid reports. They're updating their operating plan, and they're obviously preparing for seasonal hires, which you all just heard about. Habitat staff continue to work on the Winnipeg River Fishway, and they have done some presentations to the Native Fish Coalition, and they're also planning for summer work. I won't get into what each of the regional areas are doing, but we did have I will mention the Winnipesaukee Lake Trout Cull category at the Meredith Rotary Derby. And at that derby, we accepted a $2,000 donation for the Large Lake Management Program, which was very nice. Thank you. Our Trophy Fish 2025 Trophy Fish Program results are done, and we had a new state record. So you want to check that out online. Hatcheries remain busy with snow removal, maintenance, and routine fish culture work. All facilities continue with the EPA wastewater monitoring. The hatchery modernization project is reaching great milestones, including exterior wall completion, roof joist installations, below-grade piping, lots of other stuff, steel erections of the grow-out pen, everything. So things are progressing there very well. Again, we should do a site visit. Wildlife Division has advanced key initiatives across its non-game, game, and habitat programs. The non-game and endangered Wildlife Program launched a new work planning process, which aligns with the updated Wildlife Action Plan, which, by the way, I have been invited to go to DC to present our Wildlife Action Plan in front of the congressional members, and we're working through that process right now as to whether I will actually go or if we'll send one of our staff members. But it's a pretty big honor to have our agency recognized and asked to attend. So I think that's a big deal. Kudos to the non-game program. They also recently, they're obviously starting their spring annual fund campaign, but we also recently received a fairly large, over $60,000 estate donation from Cecily Clark's family and her estate. That's quite a big donation for that program, so we're very thankful for that. Game program is working on finalizing the FIS 800 rules. We also, staff are preparing to do more work on the fisher survival research, and we're partnering on several other projects with UNH. The Habitat Program, I think you got a good overview of what they've been doing, so I'll just skip that one for now. Marine Division, they continue to maintain their winter field activity, but working into trying to get set up for the spring and summer. Staff have been conducting daily coastal ice angler surveys for rainbow smelt. They've been marking a second year of strong ice conditions and precipitation. The staff also partnered with District 6 law enforcement and a nonprofit to remove derelict fishing gear. And Commissioner Titone told you about the upcoming events for that, so that's an important piece for our Marine Division. Great Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve, they have a robust winter program, public programming going on, which is drawing over 250 participants through the open hours of the days. There are family events, preschool events, story strolls, winter bay ventures, all kinds of exciting things that they have going on down there. We've had volunteers contribute nearly 30 hours to just maintenance and education support for the Givner facility. The research team has advanced a manuscript on fiddler crab colonization, so hoping to get that published. And also the training and engagement staff have prepared a virtual workshop on wetland migration and developed a community engagement strategy for saltwater restoration. Law Enforcement Division remain fully engaged with winter operations. Our specialty teams have been doing training. Canine units continue weekly tracking and survival drills. A dive team conducted under ice training, supported by the sonar and airboat crews. 2 assistant dive masters earned advanced certifications. We had 2 of our officers, female officers, Rachel Stocker and Eva Golden, participate and teach the winter skills at the Becoming Outdoors Woman program. And then can I announce our new canine officer?
Yes, you can.
All right, so Officer Stocker is going to be our first female that has been selected to receive a new canine. So that's very exciting. We're expanding our canine program, and she's a great candidate for that. So thank you, Colonel. Public Affairs Division, they continue to do broad outreach and education efforts. The new Wildlife Journal magazine has come out, so you should have received it. They're preparing major federal grants supporting recruitment, retention, and outdoor education and promotion initiatives. They hosted the BOW, which was a huge event. That was very successful. I actually got to visit for a day, and that was quite nice. Those participants had a lot of good things to say about that program. We've attended several different expos, the New England Outdoor Expo in Milford and a variety of others. The Discover Your Outdoors social media campaign is continuing. I don't know if you guys have been looking at those, but we've had quite a few new posts with staff involved, and they're going to expand that program. Albrook Hunter Education has completed its free winter archery program, and everything else is going along very well. I will say we have our Discover Wild New Hampshire Day. We're getting prepared for that. That is April 18th, so come on out and visit and spend the day with us. We draw almost 10,000 people to this complex here. From the Director's Office, we continue to do legal and legislative work. Thank you, Melissa. Environmental and federal grant work, and thanks to the other members of the Director's Office, good work there. Staff have filed certification documents for multiple FIS rules. We've also done a variety of right-to-know requests. Environmental review staff have attended public meetings and dam drawdowns, particularly in Alton and New Durham. We have several federal aid projects that are wrapping up, and an audit that we are finally closing down on, which is nice. Our federal aid staff also prepared the prior year budget materials for the June 26 renewals of our grants. Department-wide, efforts focus on coordination, planning, and major event preparation. DOIT continues to install new network and cabling across the state at all of our different locations. Myself and senior staff met regarding a variety of proposals and our priority list for sustainability. I will be sending that information to you all so you can see what we've been looking at. And we continue to, I've also been meeting with Vermont and Maine on different types of benchmarking projects that these states are doing, and seeing if New Hampshire can either gain information from their projects, or to see if we can partner in and maybe get some information specific to New Hampshire. We hosted an open house for legislators and executive counselors in the governor's office on March 6th, and that went very well. We had a few that couldn't show up because of the weather, but overall everyone who did participate had nothing but good words to say. I have a lot more written here, but I can see everybody's pretty much done for the day, so thank you all very much. We've been busy.
Call to the public. Would any of you troopers that have made it through, if you don't mind, and state your name and where you're from.
You got a couple more minutes, boys, sorry. Sean Graves, Spofford, New Hampshire. So I got a couple tidbits here. I think the majority of people will support the habitat increases, provided we do a much better job at communicating with the general public. If you just show up with the fee at the end of the have the same blowback that we had the last 2 years with either the trout closing or the bass tournament stuff. I do a really good job at communicating with the public. You know, we've been promised a boat for a long time, and that promise. So when you increase fees, about the Sunapee boat ramp is my guess. But I think if you can do at promoting it, general public would appreciate the fee. We see some type of fees. I know that when they did the fisheries thing, they talked, but they also mentioned access. That one issue with is access to fishing. You know, you mentioned the Sauhegan. They stocked the fish in there, but they did pretty where they stocked the fish. Is that about? So I personally support the increased fees. For the director, anybody to the Black Bass Symposium, and then I guess my question would be, what it only happens every 25 years, so it would have been had some representation from New Hampshire Symposium. The trout stocking thing, and I know it's probably going to upset some, but trout is not the cash looking forward. All right, are going to be much more of a cash cow in terms of being able to. If you look at the number posting in the state of New Hampshire, we are a ton of money for our bass fish, and I think they're well underrepresented to the funding that we and then you mentioned that fishing in Hillsborough County. Two things is happening. You have bad fishermen. We need to talk about the DES stop allowing our habitat to be either taken out of, killed by pesticides when they're in the lakes to get rid of those weeds. Last, I would really like to see regional for fisheries, much like wildlife. You know, wildlife has various meetings around the state, in Cheshire County, but I would like fisheries meetings around the state. And that's all I have.
Sean, I'm sorry. Glad that you corrected it.
Steve Andrews, Mr. Chair, Director, members of the Commission. I'll keep my stuff brief. But I want to echo what you just. There's a lot of warm water fishermen paying these habitat fees. So everybody shouldn't just go to connectivity for brook trout. Lakes that have super milfoil problem, that's a habitat issue. That should be a habitat fee. And hope that there'll be some consideration by the department. Those fees go through. Just go to some of the people that are paying those fees. And then the person who watched the presentation, assuming that's the presentation that will be done, caring, I would just suggest that the presenters add action on what spent on going forward. It would be super cool to see, you know, this dam's going to be removed. This stream is going to get large woody debris. This river's going to have their granite. And I think that's going to go a lot. You know, Commissioner pointed out the inflationary thing and comping it to a coffee. But I also want to know now where $15 going, what that's going to be spent on. So that will help get the. Just the last thing I'll mention is, I'm sure in the next 2 or 3 years we're going to need increase. So I'd be careful. Fee increase now and then coming now and asking for a license increase. I just kind of jigger that around a little before you go forward. Thank you very much.
Anybody else from the
Dan Dunn, New Hampshire. I'll be real quick. Does anyone know if this habitat fee dedicated to habitat, or can our politicians, a number of years ago, supposedly, and this took place, but I heard Lynch took $500,000 out of habitat fee to fund of the government. It bothered me because we had a volunteer federation that drove border east and west, north and south, deer hides on his own. He was a volunteer. Amount of money, and he marketed deer hides, and then the money all fun. That money protected from that again.
The way the laws were. Commissioners have been here a lot longer than me. Do you guys the short occurring?
Wrong, but the story that I think you could research it. I'm going to pick on Bruce. He was governor, and we were crisis. He hijacked $6,000 from a fund set up on the Sun launch.
Is that whole accent?
Correct?
You are.
Yes, that's what it was.
$6,000. All right. What he took away from the habitat. That's why the discussion is really simple. A lot of people, and that is a.
For sure, yeah, familiar. No, I would like to research this, but wonder if she was around, would have that,
We information on that. Kathy knows on it, but the commissioner here is accurate about what the I will tell you though, these funds are dedicated, and being dedicated to requirements to them. Now, the legislature changed some things with dedicated. Some of the dedicated accounts this past year were earmarked for a 5%. We were exempted from those. We listed ours. You couldn't take some of those funds for these reasons, and they were pulled aside. That 5% fee for accounts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the public? Everybody from the public here deserves a medal for sitting through all that with us, so thank you. With that, I'll call, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to adjourn because I gotta go learn how to fish.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a question of the director.
Yeah.
Yes.
How's the plaque coming?
Oh, what plaque?
Yeah, what plaque ain't up there
It's
anymore?
not there. Wonder why? It's coming, sir. It's coming.
Thank you, everybody.